जी उमर साहब no
Hello.
yes it is
Am I audible?
yes you are audible.
Okay, I am going to start. Gimana Bang? तो ग्रुप 1 हेलो तो ग्रुप
जी
तो ग्रुप बान पानो नी वीडियो स्टॉप
ओके
वीडियो तो one going to start okay image में even image nakati हाँ Shial क्या नहीं issue image में even image वहाँ विषय Hello. Hello. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Umar.
Good afternoon, sir. Government Degree College, Anantnag, hosting this special webinar.
On behalf of Department
It's our immense pleasure and honor to welcome you all for this webinar on the title Emerging Aspects in Parasitology, a Shift in Approach.
We are
delighted to invite you
and
welcome you all for this special session. I welcome you all on behalf of our patron, Professor Musab Meer, convener, Government Degree College, Anantnag. It's our honor to welcome you all for this webinar. Before we are going to officially start this program, I welcome Professor Javed Hussain, HOD,
Department of Zoology,
have welcome address.
Good afternoon to all the participants. This one day mini conference on the theme of emerging aspects of parasitology, a shift in trend. It is my immense pleasure. Welcome you all. This seminar is being organized by Department of Zoology, Government Degree College, Anantnag. I am very much thankful to our patron, Dr. Mushtaq Ali Meer, sir, principal government ecology wise and now Paris concern and support and encouragement for the conduct of this webinar. I appreciate the efforts made by my young colleague, faculty member, namely Mr. Dr. Umar, for conducting this conference. Highlight the new trends. Well, as far as this conference is concerned, we have selected emerging aspects of parasitology, a shift in trend in order to acquaint young zoologists, parasitologists, researchers, professors to understand the future of parasitology. The upcoming challenge and opportunities. As we know, the parasites are being increasingly reorganized as important pathogens with significant global, economic, environmental, and public health impacts. More than 3 billion people worldwide are infected with one or more parasites with varying morbidity and mortality. Recent emergence COVID-19 has again opened up our minds to understand various aspects of disease-causing agents. It is also important for us to appreciate the positive aspects of parasites as they are playing important roles in ecology. It is a high time to take a holistic approach or understanding various aspects of parasites, including both positive and negative. One of the major goals of modern parasitology is to understand and reorganize ecological evidence. New area of environmental parasitology has emerged in recent decades to identify and appreciate the role of parasites in the ecological functioning. Another major goal for modern parasitology is to determine signal transduction, controlling behavior, survival, virulence, and gene expression of the parasites. Factors that have crucial role in influencing the outcome of interaction between host and parasites. As we know, this seminar will be very helpful for the upcoming research. And I'm very much thankful to all the participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Saeed Javed Hussain, for your welcome address. I would like to mention here is because of our head department of zoology who takes interest in these events, we were able to conduct this webinar. So coming to straight with our today's webinar, which is actually based, we have selected a theme, emerging aspects in parasitology. As you know, we are facing unprecedented pandemic conditions, COVID-19. In this scenario, researchers have given us new challenges to understand about new emerging diseases. And in this respect, it's important for us to understand various aspects of parasitology. When we want to know about these parasites, you understand that COVID-19 is also a parasite. So in order to know more about this COVID-19, we should understand the basic knowledge about different parasites. And coming to the point, parasitology in past was thought as an area to understand just the life cycle and other aspects of parasites, taxonomy of the parasites. But now trend has changed. We are now discussing emerging aspects of parasitology. In a recent decade, two important goals of modern parasitology has been to understand immunological understanding of new emerging diseases, how parasite and host interact with each other, and how hosts are able to develop immune system against the parasites. And next goal has been the ecological relevance of parasites. That is what I would like to mention here. We have two sessions in this conference, in this mini conference. First, in the first session, we are going to discuss ecological relevance of parasites. So I will just give an idea, because when we talk about parasites, we all know that we take it in negative sense. Parasites have been considered as deleterious agents, which cause huge damage to host. And in general outlook, they are considered as an organism which has huge income without any work. So, but in recent times, different positive aspects of parasites have been unraveled. They have been considered as an important component of ecosystem. They play an important role at different levels. And you can understand that 75% of links in ecosystem are provided by parasites. So you can understand they are not the same parasites which we were recognizing earlier as pathogenic agents. So it will be strange for veterinarians, medical practitioners to tell them that parasites have many roles. I imagine there is something in their definition. When we define parasites, we only consider their negative roles. But in recent times, various aspects of these roles have been understood and well defined. So we are going to discuss these ecological roles. So our first speaker is Dr. Khurshid Tariq, Senior Assistant Professor, who is presently appointed as Senior Assistant Professor at Islamia College of Science and Commerce. And I can tell you Dr. Tariq has expertise in parasitology and immunology. He has written well-versed articles, research articles in journals which are published across the globe. He is a popular science writer and is involved in different community outreach programs. And I can tell you he was the first scholar who got GRA from Zoology Department, Kashmir University. He has a lot of expertise in different areas of research, not only in parasitology, but in other aspects. So I would like to invite Dr. Khurshid Tariq, Senior Assistant Professor, Ecological Relevance of Parasites. So this first part is regarding the positive aspects of parasites. In the next session, we are going to discuss about immunological advances in immunology at parasite host interface. Please welcome Dr. Khurshid for his talk.
Thank you very much, Dr. Umar. And first, I would like to confirm if I am audible, my voice is coming to the other end. Let me confirm this from your side first.
You are audible to us, please.
Okay. So it is basically a privilege for me. I have been invited to discuss something regarding beneficial aspects of parasites at this important event hosted by the degree Anantnag. And I am very pleased to be part of this event because 2 decades before, in 2000, I graduated from the same college. And I'm happy that Professor Saeed Javed Hussain, who is presently heading the department, he has been my teacher. He has taught us at this college. It is really a privilege to be part of this event, to speak in front of my teachers and Dr. Umar, who has been my co-supporter, colleague at University of Kashmir in participating in different research activities. And they have this time chosen again a very good theme, that what are the emerging aspects in parasitology and what is the shift in approach. So I have also decided to talk in the same direction, and I will first start my screen sharing, and you will come to know what I have chosen for this event today. So I have chosen to talk on a very crucial topic, that is, can we afford to lose a species by eradicating a parasite? Now, the main background behind choosing this topic for this event is that parasite, as Dr. Umar very nicely pointed out, the beneficial relevance or ecological relevance of the parasites. It is not something that we should be afraid of, that these are the disease causing agents, they are noxious, they are irritating. No. Although we have to admit that they are the disease causing agents, but not all. They are very much beneficial for the whole ecosystems. Of whichever ecosystem we will talk, the sustenance, the functioning of the ecosystem is not possible without the participation of parasites. As Dr. Umar also pointed out, that 75% of the ecological services are performed by the parasites. So I think this is enough of the insight that we should recognize the positive aspects of the parasites. So this shall be the main highlight of my brief presentation at this event. But I will not be discussing here the description of the parasites or the pathogenic aspects of the parasites or what are the diseases they cause. So that will be a separate scenario for me. But I will be basically confining myself only towards sensitizing ourselves. Why should we recognize that parasites need to be protected as we protect other living organisms? And what are the conditions, or and then why should we care of the parasites? Why should we? These are the four different categories of parasites. So I was muted by someone. I hope the voice is clear again.
Your voice is clear. Okay, you go ahead.
So this basically gives us the scenario of the four different diversified parasites. Like, as I told you, I will not be discussing the nematode, the cestode, the trematode, or the insect. I will not be dealing with that part. We'll be straightway dealing with the what prompts us to see the ecological relevance of the parasite. What is that in the parasite? So we will come to know what are those beneficial aspects of the parasites, what are the ecological attractions of the parasites, which we want to know so that we are in a position to uh, raise the slogan that we need to protect the parasites. So my first question will be, are parasites noxious? Are they debilitating? Are they irritating? Or they are amazing or interesting too? So, well, if I say are parasites noxious, I cannot negate this thing. We have to accept that sometimes certain parasites are very debilitating, very noxious. They are responsible for so much animal, human, and plant morbidity and economic damage. So that is a basically separate aspect. But every time and all the parasites do not belong to this category. But generally, when we basically look at this field as a student, as a scholar, as a teacher, as a student, or even as a common man, we generally, whatever we heard about the parasite, the first perception, the first insight, what we get something irritating in our image in our mind, the nasty image in our mind. We see something is very annoying, irritating. It is going to irritate us. You see the common pediculus, when the itching, the irritating pediculus, the louse or the lice you may call it. Are you sometimes someone having a gut worm or the stomach worm? Or you talk of the pinworm, which basically more annoying, irritating to the children. So we may say that these are basically noxious biological agents. I think someone is playing with the screen. Dr. Umar, if you are able to correct it, there is annotation happening somewhere. Dear Dr. Umar, are you able to listen me?
Yes, I will check it. Who is doing this? Something, someone
Please
is.
check it out, or you can disable the annotation for a while.
Okay, I will check. Just a minute.
So I have basically disabled, but I will request the one, अगर ये गलती से किसी को हुआ होगा, that the screen, someone has touched the finger on the screen and it has resulted in this. Otherwise, it will remain there for all the. Please, you look at this.
Just
It
just go ahead. I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Okay, so my point is that every time, although we may think of the morbidity or the diseases of the parasites, but this is not enough. There is a flip side to it. The flip side is that parasites are interesting and amazing too. Now, when we talk, why are they interesting and why are they amazing? Because when we study them, we study very wonderful aspects of the parasites, about their biology, about their life cycle, about their host switching or the host spectrum, how they switch from one host to another host, and do not basically intentionally never try to basically destroy or uh, damage the host. Because we have to remember the basic ecological principle that if a parasite will think that I have to destroy or damage the host, that means this parasite is going to lose his house, lose his shelter, lose the residence, lose everything. So we will come on later on to that also, what when we discuss the parasitic and host aspects. So I am here telling that we have to look for the beneficial and beautiful aspects of the parasites too. Now, here I have put up a very interesting image only to highlight this particular issue. This is basically a bat fly. इसको zoologically हम बोलते हैं Arachnophobis relax. It has basically co-evolved with the bats for millions of years. And what has basically happened during this co-evolutionary history, that this bat fly or this Arachnophobis, it has lost its wings and has developed a flat body. Why? Because it has tried to attain the minimum possible size, never to fly from this host, from this bat, because it has decided to hormonally derive every type of nutrition, every type of shelter, every type of support from this bat. But it will never try to damage or destroy the bat. So this is one thing, that when a parasite basically decides to utilize some other organism as a host, the parasite's first intention is to strategically manage the host body so that host should not get disturbed, because the moment host will get disturbed, and that means host will try everything possible to get rid of the parasite. So the parasite thinks in different terms, and the host may think in different terms, no doubt. This is a host parasite co-evolution. But my point over here is that when the parasite host selection takes place, I mean, when the parasite chooses a particular host, parasite always first tries to do minimum possible damage or destruction or irritation to the host, because this is the ecological principle. The moment parasite will damage or destroy any of the body part or any of the body component of the host, that parasite is going to lose the habitat, lose the shelter, lose everything, lose every metabolic, physiological, biochemical, or even other forms of dependence. So that is the main thing, that what is the flip side of the parasitology? The parasite host relationship is not in one way only. It is some other, it is a beneficial relationship also. And that beneficial relationship doesn't then remain restricted to the host and the one parasite only. No, it then this gets radiated to the ecosystem, because different ecosystems have different living organisms. Some may be as parasites, some may be as hosts. So it is a chain then. Who is a parasite? Who is a host? And when a host is a parasite, sometimes the host for one parasite can be a parasite for another living organism. So this thing we'll discuss in the another aspect, that is the hyperparasitism. So that means parasites are not only noxious, they are not irritating, they are not pathogenic only, they are very interesting, they are very amazing, and they are very fabulous creatures to study. So we should develop the positive understanding about the parasites, right? But as again, I was telling you that we cannot basically easily motivate everyone that you just think that parasites are just positive or they are beneficial. No, because there is a old, since the evolution of the life, there is a long held dogma. Dogma is that, or the idea is that जो भी parasite है ये इसलिए बना है, it is damaging the host, it is creating the disease, it is pathogenic. But that is not the case. I want to give you one example over here regarding the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. No doubt COVID-19 emerged as a new viral strain of the coronavirus family from 2019, and it has created havoc throughout the world. But when we look at this particular virus, coronaviruses are already present in the human beings, in other mammals too. And what they normally do, they cause the common colds. But that never means they will, what is called as every time result in the death of the individual. But once a new strain is emerging, that is something different. So the parasitic presence is always there. When the parasite shifts or drifts, so it is not only the role or the responsibility of the parasite this time. There are other things also which are being interpolated that time. You never know. What is host doing? Who told the COVID-19 or the coronavirus that your receptors are the AC receptors or the angiotensin receptors of our body, angiotensin converting enzyme receptors? So this is something we should ponder upon. There is some hidden, what is called as control, hidden power that is regulating this host-parasite relationship. And it will never go, it is never going to end. It has started, it is going, and it will emerge, and new aspects of host-parasite relationships will develop, and every time human beings are trying to understand this relationship in a better way. So when we say when we talk of this thing, I may say that parasites, we have to think that parasites will be perhaps more crucial to us. They are, we don't basically know it, but they are very beneficial to our health. Not only to human health, to the health of other aspects like the wildlife. You never know what is a particular helminth, what is a particular protozoan, what is a particular other parasite doing in the body. It is not only there for the disease. It has co-evolved with the host. So when we talk of the co-evolution, something beneficial must be also for the host is there. So whole ecosystem gets basically benefited out of the particular host parasite relationship. So we need to shift, or we need to change our thinking from negative to positive. Our thinking cannot be only negative. We cannot only think that parasites are noxious or disease-causing or pathogenic. No, we need to shift, because now environmental parasitology is gaining popularity among the students, among the scientific community. The time is gone now. We cannot be behind this long-held dogma that parasite is only pathogen. No, we have to see what are the beneficial aspects of the parasites. And as I was discussing, that it is the result of the parasite host co-evolution. And when this scenario begins, basically, it doesn't mean that one host will be restricted to one parasite. No, a host may be parasitized by so many parasites: a protozoan parasite, a helminth parasite, a fungi, a bacteria, a virus, and other categories of parasites. So this relationship basically is unique. It is basically radiated that striking evolutionary strategies basically emerge when one parasite is trying to make another organism as a host. And this relationship not be, again repeat that this is not basically emerging as a harmful or useless relationship. No, this is basically evolving in a two-way approach. One aspect can be somehow, it can result in the pathogenesis of other diseases. No, but the other aspect is also with it. And second important thing here is that we should not only always think about the human beings only. We need to think about every forms of life. Because number one is all the parasites do not infect human beings. And whatever parasites infect human beings, they are not pathogenic always. They are not disease causing. They don't always create morbidity or mortality. Or we may say they don't have to always do anything with the human lives. They are just the part of the life. They are like other life forms. So I may say that they have the right to live. So this thing will later on tell me when I will be discussing, can we afford to lose a parasite species, when I will be discussing about the parasite eradication or parasite extinction event is happening. So that time we'll be again coming to this particular juncture, how this parasite host co-evolution is basically helpful for the beneficial services for the ecosystem and not only for the harmful effects of a particular host. So I hope कि बहुत सारे जो participants होंगे, चाहे student कोई होगा, she or she might be very well right. आज तक तो मैंने सुना था कि parasite एक ऐसा एजेंट है जो किसी और ऑर्गेनिज्म में बैठ के अपना सहारा लेता है, अपना ग़िज़ा हासिल करता है. So the parasite in essence, when we talk of the what basically is a parasite, that is true. It is any living organism, any agent that makes it living from another living organism. And the diversity of parasites is there. Parasite is not restricted to only one virus, one bacteria, or one fungi, or one helminth. Oh, there are so many insects, other arthropods, bacteria, viruses, some annelids like leeches, some even major vertebrates like fishes, or even the bats, vampire bats. Those are the blood, what is called phlebotomous bats. They are also parasites. So the macro animals are also parasites, as are the micro animals. Similarly, when you talk of the helminths, the nematodes, the trematodes, the cestodes, the acanthocephalans, so that is the diversity of the parasites. So that diversity of the parasites is very important because this has been a successful, what is called as relationship. Because you might be surprised to know that जो हमारे पास अभी records हैं, we have almost 6 to 7 million species on this earth. Although people are not basically obeying that, some are saying we might be having more than this species strength. But generally we say, as of now, we have this much of, but you know, half of this strength is parasitic. Out of 6 or 7 million living organisms, half of this have parasitic mode of life. So that means life has co-evolved independently. And when a parasite decides to be a parasite, it has to think hundreds of times how it can be a parasite and how it can basically parasitize another living organism. And that particular living organism, which acts as a host for one parasite, may in turn again think that I also need to be a parasite. So this is a relationship over this earth, on this earth from millions of years. अगर हम ये aspect लेंगे शायद because of parasite, every other life form will destroy, तब तो आज तक everything should have ended then. But that is not the case. Parasite has, on record, parasite have not brought extinction any host. But unfortunately, man is bringing the extinction to so many, what is called as species. On daily basis, we are losing so many species out of the biological diversity on this earth. So parasite, bichara parasite ki koi khata isme hai nahi. On record, there is no evidence for us that we can say parasite has deliberately or intentionally or some other means brought about the extinction of any other species. No, that has never happened. There is no record for that. So as, again, we should know then when we talk that out of 6 to 7 million living organisms, half of are parasites, then what is the diversity of the parasites? कहाँ ये कितने species है parasites के? Unfortunately, अभी हमारे पास we have poor knowledge of the parasites because जो microorganism जो suppose invertebrates है या और micro life है, we are not basically able to decipher the whole parasite diversity of. We only particularly know the parasites of macro animals. Generally, the parasites of vertebrates. So on record as of now, although this figure may differ, there may be other findings also. 457 species of acanthocephalans. So acanthocephalans is a separate parasite category: nematode, cestode, trematode, mite, tick, lice, and other fleas. But this is a very meager quantity. More than 3 lakh species of parasitic helminthes are only present in the vertebrates, and that too only helminth parasites. Again, I will tell that basically we have, as of now, we have very poor knowledge of parasite diversity. We are not in a position to decipher every host to look for the parasite spectrum. How many parasite species are present in one host and how many hosts are there? This is what is called as continuing science. And every time, every day, we are coming with discovery of new species, new parasites. But अगर आप देखेंगे अभी तक scenario क्या है? We have just bacteria which make up 38% of the parasites. Viruses make 15%. Helminthes and protozoa, they make more than 25%. Fungi make around 22%. But these are never constant figures. They go on changing. Every day, new parasites may add to this graph. So, but this is as of now what we have, the parasite spectrum distributed among the different parasite categories. But one important thing over here that we need to understand is that the parasite, as it is always present on or inside the body of another living organism. So if any bad happens to the host, so it will be a relative effect on the parasite. As we every time know, most of the vertebrates are facing extinction. You talk of the fishes, you talk of the mammals, birds, other reptiles, they are facing huge extinction process. So do you ever think what is happening to these parasites then, which are part of the body of those extinct animals, which are going extinction? So that means the parasites or the helminth parasites particularly, they are also susceptible to such extinction processes because their relationship is very relative. As the host diversity will decrease, parasite diversity may also decrease. So we may say the parasites are most extinction prone then. Or a recent study has come that it has saying that even the climate change, which is again a very disastrous event happening on this planet. Climate change is being basically inferred that it will basically bring about the parasite extinction by year 270. 1/3 of the parasite species will be extinct also. So this is not a certain thing, this is a model. This is a modeling phenomena. What can be the scenario? Because as the climate change will be directly disturbing the life of other living forms, so indirectly it will be disturbing the life of parasites also. So my point over is we are always and often thinking about those animals which are beneficial to human beings. We never see the beneficial aspects of the parasites, what they have for the other life forms, what they have for the ecology, what they have for our environment, what they have for our ecosystem. So these things I'll be taking when we take the beneficial aspects or the ecological relevance of the parasites. So at that time, we'll be coming to know about these beneficial role or aspects of the parasites. But one thing we have to remember about the parasites. Only 4% of the known parasites can infect human. But we as the human Homo sapiens is after trying to make extinction of every life form because we always and often think the benefits are the opportunities for ourselves. हमें वही लगता है ठीक है, वही लिविंग ऑर्गेनिज्म ठीक है जो इंसान के फायदे के लिए, अगर इंसान को कोई फायदा नहीं हम सोचते कि ये कोई बेकार की चीज है. So if only 4% of the parasites can infect humans and majority 96% we may say are around that, they have beneficial roles. They might be regulating the other forms of life, the wildlife. Well, how can we know what's the natural check of the wildlife? Why the wildlife is not growing exponentially? So there is always natural selection operating. Nature knows how to keep balance of the life. There is a basic ecological principle. No life form can exponentially grow beyond its carrying capacity. So the parasites can be one of the components of that. They might be regulating the life. So we are basically neglecting these things. Although their role is very huge. They are very important. So we need to think. We should think, no, we are basically doing wrong. Now, why I am saying we are doing wrong? Because my theme is can we afford to lose a species by eradicating a parasite? Because I will take you to the parasite eradication events, parasite elimination events. Why is man trying to eliminate parasites? Either deliberately, intentionally, or unintentionally, but man is trying to do. You might be knowing, man is after the 6th mass extinction event this time. So I think if someone is having the question this time, we will take up the questions later on. We'll be discussing, we'll be then scanning the chat window, and we will see what are the questions. So I'll be glad to answer those questions.
Dr. Khurshid Saab, you can take up these questions later on. We will
Yes.
have a live discussion on this. Okay.
Yes. We will
Okay, go ahead.
these questions. So
One
now,
more thing. You can delete your this annotation by looking on the top. There is more option.
right.
Here, okay. You can disable it. Just see.
I have disabled it for others, but it is there. It is not. I am not trying to remove it.
Okay, then continue. It's okay. We are listening to you. Okay.
Okay. So whatever I was discussing for these few minutes, it has now basically taken me to the actual slide that we had to basically look at the relevance of parasites. When we know parasite eradication programs are in full offing for many of the parasites throughout the world. I will later on give some examples about that also. So we need to see the relevance. We need to justify why are parasites relevant? Why should we stop or contradict the parasite extinction or the eradication or the elimination events? Because we cannot think that parasites are something that we should eradicate. And certainly, as I have given some examples, we can never think in that. Being the parasitologists, being the ecologists, being the bioethicists, being of a positive thinking or a positive attitude, we should never think in that lines or those lines. But again, some might may question me. No, if some of the parasites are the cause behind the human diseases, human mortalities, they are causing the diseases, they are causing the death of human beings or other life. Why should not we do? Because that time when we do, that time we are basically forgetting the beneficial aspects of these parasites. I will tell you one example. We are now trying to eliminate, or people are trying to see that certain mosquito species are responsible for transmitting so many diseases to human beings. So they are trying to perform the what is called a mosquito elimination events. But we never know that mosquito are the natural pollinators for so many plant species. So for time being, if you will in a position to eliminate those mosquitoes, what will happen to the plant species which are dependent on the pollination for this particular agent? So basically, when we are trying to think of some destruction, elimination, or extinction process, we are basically then thinking in some other aspect only. We are never keeping our eyes open. We are basically closing the eyes that time. We are not thinking what will happen to the world if one or other parasites will suddenly become extinct. What will happen to the ecology? What will happen to the ecosystem? I use the phrase, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So that means parasites can be harmful under some conditions, but at the same time, they might be quite helpful under other conditions or for other living organisms. So we cannot think benefit or the disadvantage in only one dimension. We cannot restrict the parasites relevance only to human beings. We have to see the relevance of the parasites with other life forms too. So the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Parasite is never an enemy. So just ponder on this phrase and just think what will happen if any of the parasite, although man has tried, many of the parasites on record have been shown that they are extinct now, but they are emerging, they are re-emerging. Man eradicated smallpox, no problem. You see coronavirus, a new parasite emerged. So what can one do? What can man do? How many parasites, how many species man will brought to extinction or elimination? Nature thinks in other ways because nature has to keep the balance of life. Every living organism has a role to play, whether a parasite, a pathogen, or a free living organism. Everyone is very important in a particular ecosystem. So nature doesn't think in those lines what the man thinks. We think in unnatural way. If we will be the limits of the nature, If we will understand the natural selection, perhaps we may shift our approach. We may drift from what we are basically doing presently. So, in the backdrop of the parasite eradication or the elimination program, I stress that parasites are very relevant. We need to think in other ways also. तो यहाँ मैंने शायद पहले भी ये बात बताई थी. So we are saying 50% of the life or the species are parasite. And millions of years have happened on this planet that life has evolved. And the way we think of the parasites, so then I can say तो अभी तक तो जो parasites की pathogenic importance human ने बनाई है, that means the other 54% of the life should then have extended from this earth. Because main focus of the parasite is never to destroy the host. The main focus of the parasite is never to destroy its spectrum of hosts. Otherwise, life would have ceased to exist. Then 50% noxious viruses, bacteria, fungi, helminths were enough to bring the destruction of other forms of life, but that has not happened. So this is again, this is basically based on negative and positive thinking. How can we think? We will certainly do in that way. So negative thinking, what? We say loss of parasite, no problem. Agar parasite loss ho bhi jayega species, it should not be a threat. Because it is of no benefit to human beings or to associated animals. Then why should we care about parasite destruction or the extinction? This is negative thinking. But if we think on the other lines, we will do the positive thinking. Losing parasites could have disaster consequences for our environment, for the human health, for the health of other living organisms, overall biological diversity, overall ecological functioning. So this positive thinking will basically stop us from the negative thinking. So we have to raise our positive thinking. But at this juncture, I will not say that negative thinking means we will stop what is treating parasites as pathogens. No, we have to treat. They are the pathogens, but there is a tolerance. There is a level of tolerance always. All the human beings are a single species, for example, no doubt. There can be a noxious parasite sometime. It may take some form of life, but what then? Species as a whole is preserved. So that is why I told earlier, on record, we have no evidence that parasites have brought the extinction of any species. Although certain members of the species may temporarily get perished or may get, that's a natural process, but that is never a permanent event. Nature replaces those lost members with new ones because nature has to keep balance over this earth. So our positive thinking should prevail over the negative thinking. As is it applicable to other aspects of our life, it is also applicable to seeing the ecological relevance of the parasites. So now I am coming to the point. I have been discussing so on now some relevance of the parasites, and because I thought that first I should see how the parasites can be some major importance for us. So now I am trying to basically make you understand what are the parasite extinction and eradication events. And I will be discussing this in two ways. One is the natural way, what is the natural cause of certain parasites. So we cannot do anything with that. If nature has decided to bring about the extinction or destruction or elimination of any parasite, so that time I cannot say that we should stop this process. So there are certain natural risks of the parasite extinction also, as are the natural risks for the extinction of other forms of life. We are losing certain forms of life, certain species on daily basis, but we have to only think that if human or the anthropogenic pressure is behind that. As I told you, human is about to bring about the 6th mass extinction of life on this planet. But around on record 3%, it is based on the IUCN, this information, International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources, when they published the red book or the red list, wherein they publish what are the endangered percentage of different animals or the living organisms. And on base of that, 3% of the helminth parasites, we may think they will be certainly endangered, because based upon the percentage of vertebrate species which are listed as threatened as per the IUCN Red Book list. So this is natural thing. Man cannot do anything to this. Secondly, certain environmental changes, but these environmental changes can be again man-enforced or natural. They may bring about the decline or loss of the parasite. But what basically happens sometimes they remain invisible to us. हमें दिखता ज़्यादा ये देखिए आप या अगर we will अगर कहीं पर deforestation होगी it will come to know we will come to know it because it's a visible impact on our ecology or our ecosystem. But when a parasite loss takes place, we basically don't come to know because they are hidden agents. So हमें पता नहीं चलता है कि कहाँ पर क्या बोलते हैं डिजास्टर होगा किसी इकोसिस्टम या किसी पर्टिकुलर एनवायरनमेंट में because the effect is basically big, major, but it is invisible. We are not basically in a position to perceive it. We only perceive when we see the ecological functioning dysfunction or ecosystem defuncts. When a particular ecosystem defuncts or ecosystem is not performing properly, that time we basically think that something is happening which our eyes are not basically to observe, but that has happened. Similarly, as per another finding, this is basically Carlson's study, he's saying us that 5 to 10% of basic major 8 parasite groups, they will be extinct by 2070. This is basically based upon the projected जो shifts होते हैं, environmental shifts, host shifts because of the destruction, because of the loss of the diversity of life, and because of the impact of the climate change on the different types of habitats. So it is basically a model they have developed. They are saying by during the coming 5 decades, we will be losing up to 10% of the major parasite species also. And that will be again natural losses. And the model basically says us that it may perhaps go up to 30%. That means it may not be only 10% because if the climate change threatening is at the same pace, if the impact of the climate change is happening at the same pace, that means every form of life is susceptible to it in relation to other disasters of the ecosystem or of the environment. So even 30% of the parasitic helminths may go extinct by 2070 because simply host extinction might take place. So obviously, but one thing I want to tell over here is that wherever parasite tries to see that a host is basically extinct or it has lost its habitat, parasite basically has its what is called as genetic programming. It can shift the what is called as hosts, what is called as host switching or host, as is basically happening this time because of climate change. Because of climate change, we are seeing emergence and re-emergence of so many parasite diseases. It is because parasite has to live. No doubt, parasite will come. So I may see that this model cannot be perfect. It is not necessary that every time a host will get extinct, parasite may get no. Parasite may shift its host selection. Because you see, when dinosaurs got extinct from this earth, that time there were other life forms also. But those adopted, they changed their even food habits, their living habits, their life form, their size. Everything got changed and they could adapt in a better way to the changing climatic conditions or the environmental conditions. So those things may again happen. So nothing is categorical. No model is perfect. It is just a model, just a theory. It may change. But it is just a generalization. What are the scenarios? These things might happen under the natural, what is called a risk factors of parasite extinction. And here I want to make you understand between two related terms about the parasite destruction. One is elimination and there is eradication. You need to know it. So when we talk of the elimination basically will mean it is the reduction to zero of the incidence of any parasitic disease or a parasite, or the infection it may be caused by the same in a particular or in a defined geographical area, but as a result of deliberate efforts put by the man. So man may try to eliminate some of the parasite from a particular area. You see, I will later on give you some examples also about certain parasites which are basically creating havoc in certain regions of the world. So that time man may think of removing them from the defined geographical areas. So that will be basically the elimination. But when we talk of the eradication will be when the permanent reduction of any particular parasite will take place throughout the world. There will be zero incidence of any parasite. No parasite incidence will be reported throughout the world. So that will be then the eradication. And presently, the parasites are struggling because of the elimination, because of the eradication. In some parts of the world, elimination practices are in vogue. In other parts of the world, eradication practices are in vogue for certain other parasites. But there are agencies, there are people who have raised the slow, what's called voice against this elimination and eradication event that we need to stop. We need to think in we need to manage the parasites, not to eradicate or eliminate them. So that was important that we should understand how the elimination and eradications are different from each other. So this is now the argument. This is the argument that as we think of the conservation of other species, we should also think of the conservation of parasite species. As a conservation biologist, as a conservation student, one should also think that parasites have the right to share this earth. They have the equal right as the right of human beings or as the right of other life forms. So they need to be conserved. We need to initiate the conservation programs and strategies for the parasite. In fact, this is happening now in the world because of the resurgence in the field of environmental parasitology and ecology. Basically now people are now initiating the parasite conservation programs. It is not only the panda conservation, the hangul conservation, or the panther, or the leopard, or the bear, or the tiger conservation, or the butterflies. Now it is also it is moving toward the parasite conservation, because the idea is that parasite species should be allowed to exist. If not, they are doing any benefit, let it be for some time. So they are not giving benefit to human beings. Still then, they should be allowed to live their own life. It is not necessary that we should all, jaise maine pehle bataya, it is not that we should always think that what is the benefit to humanity and we will warrant the conservation of any species based on that. No, we need to think beyond that. It is not necessary that only the benefit to the humanity is important. We need to warrant the conservation based upon the in situ survival of a particular parasite and its ecological relevance. But again, as I told you, only the bioethicist, only a conservation biologist, only a positive thinker may perhaps think on those lines. A weak argument will emerge when a negative thinking will come. Some will know what the hell we have to do with the parasites. What we have to do with them if they are of no benefit to human beings, as the human beings are basically doing at present. But people like me, people like the parasitologists, they think in the positive terms. They keep the mind open that parasites have the right to live on this earth as is the right of other living forms. So that basically becomes the strong argument behind the what's called as application, is because behind the creation, behind the development, behind the raising of conservation aspect projects for the parasites too. Because ecological relevance of the parasites is very important. Now that was the natural way of extinction. Now why is man trying to bring about the what is called as extinction, elimination, or destruction of the parasites? You might have all heard about the guinea worm, the Dracunculus medinensis, a very debilitating what is called as nematode parasite. But its infections are mostly in the Mediterranean region or in the African belt, hence it is known as Mediterranean worm also. But you might be knowing this thing that by 2000, India was declared as a guinea worm-free country by the WHO, because eradication and elimination events were happening for so many years. But it is not that no case of guinea worm is emerging. It is still emerging. It is still emerging in some particular human beings. Or the problem is that it is emerging in the dogs. So that means if a parasite is being deprived of one host, the parasite will strategically think to change the host. So at the end, then what we are getting? If we are eliminating one parasite from one host, the parasite shifts to another host and it lives its life. So the effort has become effortless later on. तो अभी का जो है the guinea worm eradication deadline जो है, it was basically 2020 earlier. By इस साल जो 2020 था, world has thought of eradicating the guinea worm, but it has been now extended by 10 more years. अब जो deadline है, that is that by 2030 we should be able to remove this infection from the human beings, this debilitating guinea worm disease. तो अगर आप थोड़ा गुनिया वर्म के बारे में पढ़ा होगा, this infection basically happens, it has a different cycle outbased, but ultimately when the parasite, when the nematode develops in the human beings, that it erupts out through the skin. So we will not go here for the details of this guinea worm, but I am highlighting this as per the past. So man is basically still behind this elimination, eradication of the guinea worm from the world. But as I told you, the major emerging issue that is that infections are rising among the dogs. So it may remain the dogs, then the parasite may again think, now, okay, now I can shift back to the human beings. So that is the scenario. This is one aspect of the man enforced parasite eradication program. So man is trying to eradicate certain of the parasites from the existence, just for the benefit of the human beings themselves. But it is the nature that knows whether finally this will be a success story or a not, or a new strain or a new form of this guinea worm may emerge. Similarly, this slide over here will give you some overview of the eradication programs happening with other parasites. You see Texas cattle fever. So ये काफी पुराना है. This has been eradicated from America or other regions जो related है United States को because of the disease eradication. इसी तरह American sickle worm, it has been eradicated. इसी तरह hypoderma species है, cochleomia हम जो sickle worm या hydrated cyst है, these have been eradicated or they are on way to eradication from different parts of the world. Or this tick, Amblyoma variegatum, or the tropical bond tick from the African, from the Caribbean island, it is being thought of to be eradicated. Or this called as revived blindness disease. So these are some examples while I am trying to highlight that these are the eradication events, elimination events happening in different parts of the world. But a time will come perhaps when these species will not be existing. But that time we will be depriving our earth, our planet from so many ecological services because you never know what are the beneficial aspects of these parasites. We are keeping the eyes closed at this juncture. So we will be happy, we'll be cheerful. We are spending huge funding on the eradication of these parasites. But every time these parasites will change, they will re-emerge because they have been programmed by the nature. They have the right to live. They have the same genetic material as other life forms. So that genetic material has those adaptations to adapt in a new way, to adapt to new conditions. So these can be just what's called as time gaining activities only, but a time will come that we will be saying, okay, we had for certain years eradicated some parasite, but it has re-emerged again, or it has emerged in some other species. So that will be the disaster later on when human beings will come to know that what we have eradicated, some new disease erupted. So let us accept that we may be in a position, we will successfully eradicate in one infection. एक infection, एक disease के बदले more than 10 new infections emerge. What will do then? Does it mean we will start the eradication or the elimination event for everyone? Till now, we are not in a position to develop a vaccine against this coronavirus strain, COVID-19. And the time when every time this vaccine will be available, till then a new strain will be emerging. What will do then? So the important thing is that we need to learn how to manage the parasitic infections, how to live harmoniously with the parasites, how to take care of the parasites when they are part, because we will discuss that later on. Dr. Manzu basically will be perhaps talking on the immunological aspects of the parasites in the next session. So certain new things might be touched regarding the role of immune system in maintaining the host-parasite relationship. So what will happen that time? We cannot disobey immune system. On one side, immune system will allow the host to get rid of the parasite. But on the other side, parasite will try to evade or suppress the immune system, but will not damage the immune system because parasite has to live in the cell, within the cell, outside the cell, in the tissues, or in the gut or in the skin or somewhere else. So that will be a continued relationship. So my point over here is, although eradication programs are in full offing for these parasites, they doesn't, this is not a green signal for the man. This is never a positive signal for the man. Something more will be bringing in the parasite world itself. They might come in a new avatar. What will man that time do? So I may say, is then this justified that we're eradicating the parasites? Because as a students of biology, as students of ecology, as environmental biologists, we have to remember density dependent ecological principle is governing the host parasite relationship. That means that there is always a limit. There is a tolerance up to which point a parasite will be tolerated within the host to live a harmonious life. And if a point comes that parasite will be shifting from that balancing, or it will try to bring the extension process in the host, maybe. So the host has the strategy because it's a coevolution. Host will do in its own way. So as a matter of fact, if we assume that density of the host will reduce or the population of the host will reduce, what will happen? As the population of the host reduces, parasite transmission rate will also come down, because we have to believe ecological principles. So that means parasite will always try to basically stop or minimizing the host damage or the destruction, because it is never in the interest of the parasite to deliberately destroy. Whatever diseases are coming, this is the relationship with the host parasite. These are the pathogenic aspects of the emerging relationship. Host tries to protect itself from the parasite. Parasite tries to get protection within the host. So whatever morbidity, whatever pathogenicity results, biochemical, immunological, or histological, this pathogenicity, that is the outcome of this relationship. What is called as immunological aspects of host parasite relationship. So I expect we'll be in a position to hear more about this from the speech of Dr. Manzu Ahmed. He will be deliberating on the what is called as immunological aspects of the what is called as parasitic infections. So I will skip this one. I have discussed it, this thing. This thing I have also discussed it. Right. This is very important. So let us accept that we are very much sure of the parasite extinction. Or what is happening, the host is getting extincted because of natural processes, or the man enforces. What will happen basically? Because it's a coevolution. If one agent is, you see, so many parasites are living harmoniously with the human beings. They will never destroy, they will never irritate human beings. They are there. But we never know, are they really needed for us? They are basically needed for us. Our whole physiology. You talk about the microbiome, इसको हम microbiota बोलते हैं. The useful microbial flora of our body is able to guide our immune system to work. Right? So if we are thinking that bringing about the extinction or destruction of one agent is sufficient, the other will not get disturbed. No. So host will certainly get disturbed if we are bringing about damage or destruction to the other parasite. Because at the level of ecology, at the level of basic principles of the what is called as ecological principles, so co-extinction will basically mean loss of overall biological diversity. There will be irreparable loss of history of coevolution, because coevolution is happening, has happened. One agent is trying to co-evolve with other agent. And when evolution will talk of the co-evolution, it might have to happen for the benefit of both. So that doesn't mean that we should be happy that we are after the parasite elimination programs. So we should accept they are violating the conservation genomics of the parasites. If we have to think of the conservation biology of other living organisms, so why should we forget that the conservation genomics of the parasite is not important? So situation is complicated, but we need to keep our eyes open. We need to think on the positive lines that if there is a continuous threat to the what is called as parasitic infections emerging and re-emergence. Although situation can be complicated for men, but the phenomena of parasite elimination or the eradication will lead to co-extinction, and this has basically been shown. It is not in the real world example, but under certain models we have come to know that certain hosts which were deprived of the parasites, those hosts didn't do perform well. Later on, I will use certain examples of that you also. So yes, I told about you this thing that smallpox was eradicated way back by men before 1970. लेकिन तब तक बाकी वायरस का नाम नहीं था. We didn't know Nika, Zika, and coronavirus, in fact, COVID-19. But these are now emerging infections. What will happen? So if 5 decades before we have eliminated some parasite, एक के बदले में बहुत ज्यादा आ गई. What we will do? So that means what is basically prompting me that elimination or the eradication program are basically to improve the human health. We are wrong if we think on those lines. We need to be adaptive. We need to adopt a realistic approach. We need to be in coordination with nature. We need to perform the effective management of parasitic diseases. We need to protect the parasitic diversity. Because, I repeat, parasites are well worth to be protected, preserved, conserved. They are not to be eradicated. Otherwise, parasite is very dangerous. The moment it comes to know that man is trying to be very over smart, we have to remember that parasites are already smart. These are strategic. They are smart. They are prudent. No other is prudent. No other agent is strategic. No other product is strategic, smart as is a parasite. So please join me if I say that we cannot afford a parasite species loss at the cost of its man-enforced eradication. We cannot. We have to accept that we are basically bringing more trouble to ourselves by thinking in these lines. We need to keep this in mind that parasite is a creation by the nature. It has everything that within it which will enable it to live a better life, outperform the wit and what is called as might of the human beings. But as we sometimes know, these are invisible as COVID-19, invisible entity. What are the visible impacts on the earth? Everyone knows about that. What can one man do? We have to learn to live the life under such conditions. We cannot basically hide ourselves. We have to accept what is basically I trying to emphasize is that we need to accept the natural principles. We have to look at with everything within the ambit of natural selection. We have to believe it is natural selection which is governing the life of human beings, as it is governing the life of the living forms. So why to be over smart then? Why should we forget the smartness of a parasite? It is everything knowing. It is knowing everything what the man is doing. But unfortunately, we are not in a position to understand, comprehend how the parasite is drifting and shifting. So that is, we cannot afford basically. We cannot afford the loss of a parasite species by eradicating any of the parasite, because by affording the loss of parasite, we may just think loss of one species, but it will be the loss of, as Dr. Umar was telling, 75% of the ecological services are performed by the parasite through these trophic chains. So what will happen to those ecological services that time? So here I will now take you to this another aspect, that is, now I have been telling upon that we should not think in the lines of elimination, destruction, or what's called as parasite eradication. Parasite, no, because parasites are ecologically relevant. They have so many useful aspects of the parasites. So although we may say that this is an old field, environmental parasitology is not something which is जो decade पहले का field है. It is an old field, but it has what is called as resurged. There is now ecological suitability which is being seen in the parasites in the coming times, because the hidden secrets, the hidden beneficial aspects of the parasites are being now unraveled. They have huge environmental significance, and more will emerge in the coming times. Because we have to remember, it is the principle of eat or be eaten. It is a natural edict. One parasite can be host for other agent. Similarly, a host for one parasite can be parasite some other host. कहीं पर ये किसी को खाएगा. It can be a predator, it can be a pathogen, it can be a prey, it can be a host, it can be a parasite. So it is a complex ecological functioning. It is the beauty of the ecosystem, that how the particular ecosystem operates. Eat or to be eaten or get eaten. So whatever we talk of producers, consumers, detritivores, scavengers, or other forms of these trophic levels. So the parasites are connecting everything. Parasites can be parasites of all those chains of the what is called as food chain or the food web or the trophic level. So if there is some what is called as disruption, one parasite is lost from one of the food chain, it will disrupt the whole food web. इतना ही नहीं है काफी, parasites have a beyond this, they have important role for us. They contribute to the overall biodiversity of the life. But unfortunately, when we talk of the biological diversity, we forget about the parasites. We never think about the parasite biodiversity. We look for the biodiversity of other life forms, but we do take ourselves for the conservation of the parasite biodiversity. Because they have ecological roles, they have evolutionary roles. We have to accept co-evolution. If we have failed to accept co-evolution, we fail to understand parasite-host relationship. So my point is, parasites are ecologically very much relevant, and they have so many useful aspects that we can never afford to lose them. And here I will not be basically discussing every useful aspect, but I will be trying to highlight some major ecological aspects, beneficial aspects of the parasites. And that one important thing is diastrophic interaction. Parasites are very much involved in the interaction of so many food chains or the food level or the trophic levels. Much of the energy will be flowing through the parasites because they will be the part of the food chain, food web. Although they are small size, we may say they are small size, they are a cryptic nature, but that doesn't mean they will not be important. Because as I told you, they may have to function as the predators and the prey. They may feed on the range of hosts, but at the same time, certain predators, they might be more abundant on like this. I will read it here. It is basically example that certain lizards, scorpions, and spiders, they are more abundant on islands where seabird colonies are present. Because the seabird colony birds, they have the parasites, ectoparasites. So the ectoparasite is basically the food for these lizards, scorpions, and spiders. So this is the connection. Now, if we forget about this trophic connection, what will do? What will happen? So that means predators. If the parasites are themselves as the predators, so they are consuming the parasites. Parasites are becoming the part of the food. So they are themselves food for other animals. They are not only robbing the hosts from the food, they are providing the energy and food to other life forms. So I think this is very important. We should understand, we should remember that parasites are the part of food for other life forms. So this is the example over here. You see, this is the this is the Catogaster worm. But it has the trematode parasites, which emerge from the freshwater snail. So that is cross linkage, right? So the worms, they are feeding basically on the trematodes. And trematodes are basically emerging from the snails. So if the snail is one group of animals, trematode is the second one, oligate kernels are third one. So third different trophic levels are connected. Now imagine if this trematode is not here. So that means oligocate worm will not be able to feed on the trematode parasite. And this freshwater snail is basically able to give shelter to the trematode. Similarly, another example on the right side is about the labroids and the shrimps, because they are every time busy removing the parasite, ectoparasites from the trout. A coral trout example hai. So that means a parasite in one host, right? Okay, it is as an ectoparasite, but you see other living agent is having it as food. It is a specific relationship. This Calina rice or the labroids, it cannot have other food as of the shrimp, which are removing the ectoparasites. यहाँ पर मुझे एग्जांपल याद आ गई of the blue whale. You talk of the blue whale, the major life form on this earth, living in the waters. What is the food source of blue whale? It is the krill, the plankton, the microscopic food. If nature has not created this balance, then the blue whale would have engulfed all of the fish. But see, the krill are produced in so much quantity that every time a blue whale takes a gulp, it takes millions and billions of these krills, the micro objects. So that is the beauty of nature basically. Every life form is important. Nature has created ecosystem, वहां पर हर किसी life form की importance है. You see, this is another example. Again, a trematode parasite, Rhizoria on the tree. It basically causes a very strategic thing in the what's called as Pacific frog. The infection of this particular trematode, basically what happens is this frog can develop extra limb or deformity can result. Now, why it is happening? That means this trematode parasite is somehow changing the genetic programming of the limbs of this frog. But what will happen to this frog because of the extra limb or the deformity because of this particular parasite? Because it will impair the host's ability to jump and swim. ये frog shift नहीं कर पाएगी अपने habitat को. इससे इसको दो फायदे होते हैं इस frog को. It is living its life. It will be not prone to predation. यानी कि जो इस पे खाना predate करना चाहेंगे, those other animals will try to eat this frog. This frog is not being allowed to drift from its own habitat. So उसको फायदा मिल गया यहाँ से parasite को, but we had to accept that some form of morbidity, some form of what is called a deformity is happening. But this is basically happening. So it is basically what is called as preventing it from getting what is called as predated by other life forms. Similarly, horsehair worm, they contribute to the larger ecosystem function. I have basically a short video clip for that. If I will get some time, so I will later on play this. So till now, I will skip this. So you might be surprised to know about the virus grazers. The virus grazers is a very emerging science in the parasitology. So marine protozoans, marine plankton, they eat basically viruses as a food. That is why we call them as virus grazers. But the intermediate agent here is a bacteria. These are basically bacteriophages. They infect the bacteria. But these marine protozoans, what they do, they basically are eating the viruses. So what is this virus giving them? Virus is giving enough of the carbon, phosphorus, and nitrogen. They are being thought that they will be a very good supplement to the carbon-rich diet. So that means parasites have very, very relevant ecological services. So they are not only providing the food source, they are also controlling the distribution and population size of their hosts. And by doing it, they basically prevent their hosts from getting eaten or predated by other living organisms. So parasites are doing dual purpose. उनको अपना फायदा होना ही है. They are having their benefit, but they are protecting their hosts also. So this thing we have discussed that they are part of the food webs. They are part of the energy ecosystem. They are part of the food chain. So that every time of energy is getting transmitted to the parasites. So parasites being the part of the food chain, they are basically maintaining the ecosystem energetics. And यहाँ पर मैं आपको एक beautiful example देना चाहूँगा. This is very important. The competition. Basically, parasites are doing something with the competition of the life form. You see, they can influence the biodiversity. Basically, they can alter the outcome of competitive interaction between two hosts. जिसको हम basically बोलते हैं parasite mediated competition. That means a tolerant host species, यानी कि दो host species है, it may amplify up, यानी कि एक host species अगर parasite ज्यादा हो गए, it will basically make this host species overcome over other hosts, which is a less tolerant host species. For example, एक example इस scenario की है, एक inferior species, Anolis gingivinus, outcompetes Anolis vatsi. These are two species in the islands of Saint Martin, right? So by the presence of the parasites in these two species, one host is having competitive advantage over the other, right? Similarly, lizards, they also have the malarial parasite. But the two lizards can co-occur only where dash is heavily parasitized. यानी कि जो पहली वाली Anolis gingivalis है, if it is heavily parasitized, then both lizards can host a malarial parasite. So that means the competitive ability of the dominant hosts is basically reduced by the parasites. So this is the sort of the role of the parasites in the ecological competition. Similarly, we need to remember the hygiene hypothesis about the parasites. Role of parasite is very important and they provide us the protective immunity against so many parasites. So that means we should not be always trying to get rid of the parasites. अगर हमारी body में parasites है, they are for the benefit also. So hygiene hypothesis should not be that we should always every time get rid of every type of parasite. No. If we are doing that, and the same thing is happening basically in other life forms also, presence of one parasite or presence of some specific parasite species basically help the immune system of that particularly to get built up in a nice way to better fight up other diseases. I think there is a call to me. So again, the worm therapy, the important field, this emerging field that now the helminthes or the worms will be used to treat other diseases. For example, blood-sucking hookworm or the whipworm, right? So these are the parasites, these are the worms that they will be required. They will be the source of novel drugs also. So that is basically called as bioprospecting. Bioprospecting means we will be using parasites to look for the alternative drugs. Similarly, they contribute to the biomass. They are part of the biomass. So I will be somehow trying to minimize the presentation. As a contribution to the biomass, they are very much important. Similarly, the host immunity and the hyperparasitism. Again, the role of parasites is very important. If there are certain questions on that, we will take it. Similarly, the parasites are emerging very important conservation tools. They as bioindicators. They can tell us about the scenario of the what is called as ecosystem. So I will conclude my talk that if we are in a position to maintain the functioning of every ecosystem on this earth, we need to consider that parasites have the role for us to play. They have very important, significant role for us because they have tremendous importance, not only by providing the source of food, they connect various food chains. They can be the source of drugs. They can be the part of microbiota. They can be the part of normal functioning and whatnot. They are very important. So I thank you Thank you very much for your time, for giving a patient hearing. And I will be glad to take some questions. And if Dr. Umar is able to listen me, he may please talk.
Thank you, Dr. Khurshid, for your nice talk. It was highly informative, especially for youngsters who want to take parasitology as a subject of research. And I can imagine that after your lecture, researchers or young aspirants will not think parasites as cheaters, suckers, or graduates, and they have some role in ecosystem. And I think there is plenty of role they play in an ecosystem. Basically, our aim was to give information to young aspirants, zoology aspirants, because they come to us and tell us what are the new aspects in which we want to work. So these are the areas you should choose. You should understand how beautifully Dr. Khurshid told you that there are various areas, positive areas, which you can think and work on this. And the beauty of research is when you think, differently, out of the box. So this is one area which you can think, because majority of veterinarians and medical researchers will not agree somehow when we are talking about positive aspects of parasites. So we have, just a minute. We have, I will just unmute if somebody would ask some questions, live questions. I have unmuted all. Okay, so I have a few questions because I have noted down some questions. One question is from Amir Hamid. He wants to ask, what makes a parasite? Or what are the factors or causes that force any living organism to adopt a parasitic life? So what do you, Dr. Khurshid? Ah. Unmute yourself.
Okay. So a parasite is just a demarcation basically we are creating while naming. It's a nomenclature aspect. As I was telling you that a parasite, an enemy of enemy can be my friend. So what does basically that? That is a parasite on one occasion is host at some other occasion, right? Or a host on one occasion is a parasite on second occasion. So this is never clear that a parasite is always a parasite. Parasite means we are temporarily trying to see the relationship between two living organisms. But the one agent which we are labeling as a parasite, it is a host. You see, so most of the E. coli bacteria, how many these bacteriophages are living on the bacteria? But the bacteria E. coli is a host, a parasite. So same is the case with so many what is called as hyperparasitism. One parasite is host for another parasite, right? So you should never be firm that when we are demarcating or making someone as a parasite, you are just basically trying to understand the host-parasite relationship. It is never a clear-cut demarcation. One parasite is subsequently host for another parasite. So it is just to understand the basic relationship between the living organisms. It is basically associationship. It is, you see, symbiosis, commensalism, parasitism, right? So these are different types of ecological relationships. So every time when we talk of how can we label sometime as a parasite, if some living organism is not having its own home, own habitat, it is trying to utilize some other's body as a habitat and trying to utilize all the metabolic dependence from that. We will utilize that, we will call that as a parasite. But at the same time, this parasite will be a host for another agent. So the terminology is not clear cut. It goes on changing. That is why I told you the enemy of the enemy is my friend. And the same thing we discussed it in the trophic interaction. One parasite is connecting different food chains. How? At some time it is a predator, other it is a prey, some is a pathogen, it is a host, it is a parasite. So you should never be firm in these definitions. So, but for understanding purposes, we know what is a parasite, any agent which has a metabolic dependence on other organism, either to live a life or to derive nutrition or to reproduce. So that will be a parasite. But the host will be someone which will be providing all these facilities to that particular parasite. So host will be that. But at the same time, this host will be a parasite for other hosts. So the relationship goes on like this in our ecosystem. That is why I was emphasizing that parasites are very, very relevant, very, very important. We cannot afford the missing of a single parasite from any of the food chain or of the trophic level. It is a disaster for the functioning of whole trophic system in the particular ecosystem or in a particular environment. I hope I am able to satisfy the person who has asked this question about the parasite and the host.
So we have another question from Lareba Hamid. She is basically a research scholar, Department of Zoology, University of Kashmir. She wanted to ask how to curb the mutations of various parasites like viruses.
You just repeat the question, Umar.
How to curb the mutations of various parasites.
Okay. You see, if you talk first, we need to understand mutation, then there is a curve. Mutation is something that we basically cannot curb. We can curb it only under laboratory conditions. And we can mutate parasite. You see, the best example we can take from the COVID-19. COVID-19 is basically a coronavirus. Coronavirus is in fact naturally present in so many mammals, including human beings, cattle, human, bats, and so on, right? But why a COVID-19 has emerged? COVID-19 has, because it's a mutated strain from those coronaviruses, right? Now, man has very little, I think no role in curbing the mutation. Because one is we will curb the mutation. No, if for some time we will be able to curb the mutation in the laboratory, we suppose we may bring about a mutation in the COVID-19 so that it is not able to bind to the ACE receptors, angiotensin enzyme receptors in the human beings present in our cells. But what will happen? As I told you earlier also, these are the challenges for the parasite. Every time, why are viruses smart? Every time they infect one species, they come with a new strain when the infection is complete. I will want to give one example here. Last year, 2 years before, a Chinese scientist basically cloned human babies. He made a twin baby that were naturally resistant to the HIV. How? Because he mutated basically the what is called as those helper T cells in those babies which are providing receptors for the HIV or the human immunodeficiency virus. But what will that happen? Is that in the position that we are basically stopping the virus to infect the helper T cells? One is the virus will come to know that my host site has been blocked. This virus will be thinking, it is will be showing in the endemic variation. Every time we have the flu and influenza, what are those? Every time we are suffering from flu and influenza because एक सीजन में एक किस्म का फ्लू है, नेक्स्ट सीजन में दूसरे किस्म का है, एक कंट्री में एक किस्म का है, दूसरे कंट्री में, because these parasites know, these viruses know, every time they are basically mutating, they are bringing about new strains, new avatars. A vaccine is available against one strain. A flu vaccine is available against one flu strain. It will not be applicable to other flu strains because viruses are mutating. So as far as the question is now concerned that how can we curb the mutation, I may say we cannot curb under the natural conditions the mutation. One is we will release a mutated, suppose a curbed mutated strain into the population. It might be a new thing because it has not co-evolved. It might now look to co-evolve with the hosts. So as is basically happening with the COVID-19 this time. Now in every country, new strains are being noted. Why? Because as per the region-specific treatments, as per the region-specific programs operating in different countries, and as per the natural immunity. You see, one theory was there that European or the English people are more susceptible to these flus. Why? Because they are not much naturally resistant, but we as Asians are. Why? Because our immune system has co-evolved with the parasites. We are dirty in the childhood. Our ecosystem, our environment is dirty. Sometimes to be dirty is very important. That is the significance of microbiome or microbiota. So it basically helps us to guide our body to build a stronger immune system. That is the reason people in the America, people in the Britain die of flu more as compared to people in this part of the world. We are not dying more of the flu, but they are dying because their immune system is not strong against flu, but ours is. So that is the reason. But do think that we cannot curb mutation. We can curb it temporarily in the laboratory, and that is only, and that true in case of viruses. RNA viruses have high antigenic variation. They are so tremendously drifting and shifting that every time, if for 1 month we are devising some treatment, next month there will be a new mutation in the same virus. So I may say we are not in a position to curb the mutation. We can only curb the mutation temporarily under the laboratory conditions. But if you talk in the field, we cannot do that.
Thank you for your response. We have a couple of more questions, but we will take these questions later on because our next guest is waiting here. I'm sorry, we were just extending this lecture, but thank you.
Dear Dr. Umar, please, you do one thing. If there are certain questions, you ask them, or they can email me.
No, sir. You will remain with us, Dr.
Okay.
Later on, after
later on take them.
completion of Dr. Manzoor's lecture, we will ask you later on. I will keep the in my notebook, and I will later on ask you. So,
okay, thank you very much.
Dr. Manzoor's time is very precious. He is these time is really engaged in university different assignments. So I will not take time. So as I told you, our second session will be regarding the immunological understanding of new emerging diseases. So basically, this is not a talk, but what I was saying that this was the major goal for modern parasitology from last decade, to understand immunological understanding of new emerging diseases. Why immunology is so important in these times? The perennial appeal of immunology lies in the fact that it provides a window for almost every aspect of biological and biomedical research. So there are various aspects we study of diseases, but immunology is the basic thing which we need to understand so that we can understand different aspects of drug delivery and other aspects. As you know, we are facing unprecedented times of a pandemic 2019. So immunology is one aspect which can help us to deliver new drugs and help us to eliminate this disease by innovating new vaccines. So we have next speaker with us, Dr. Manzu Ahmed Meer. He is presently head department of bioresources, University of Kashmir. I congratulate him that recently he got his department separate from botany, and he will get now funding, and this will be good for the progression and overall development of the department. So he is going to talk about emerging aspects in parasite immunology, and I can tell you he's a renowned research scholar from North India, and he has written many publications in high impact journals, and I can tell you that he has also published some books on immunology, and I read recently one of it, developing co-stimulatory molecules for immunotherapy of diseases. So you can imagine that he's the best person to speak on this topic, emerging aspects in parasite immunology. I hope he will also discuss new emerging aspect, that is eco-immunology. So over to Meer Sahab to speak. So I will make you co-host this time. Okay, just wait for a while. Just wait. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, sir. You are visible to us, sir.
Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and thank you Government Degree College Anantnag, Dr. Umar Zargar, head of the Department of Zoology, the principal of the concerned college, for giving me an opportunity to talk on this topic of recent trends in parasite immunology. As we had a wonderful talk by Dr. Tariq, he's a close friend of mine, and we two had grown together at the University of Kashmir and have been in touch since long. So it was a very enthusiastic talk given by him, which has shown light on many, because we should not take parasites always as our enemies, as is not the case. But the name is more than itself what says, because whatever has been talked about till date in the literature and everywhere else, it is that once we hear the name of a parasite or a pathogen or any microbe, we say that it is a foe rather than a friend. But we in microbiology even say that 99% of the microbes which we have, they are beneficial to us, starting from the gut microbiome, then the various which help us in the decay and decomposition of the materials, then we have which convert many of our enzymes. And then in industrial revolution, after that, we had seen how these bacteria are helpful to us, or how those parasites are helpful to us. Most of the industries at present are running only on these, and they have trillions of dollars of economy they are pumping into the system. So without wasting any time, as we are already behind the schedule, I would like to talk about the parasite immune responses, how the immune responses and what are the way forward. For example, if we are talking about the different times we are right now facing an unprecedented time in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic, and all across the globe, we are saying there's a race or horde going on to develop an effective vaccine against this, because the medicines are not available. We are using here and there antimicrobial agents, which are not directly targeting the virus. And we are seeing so much of mortalities across the globe, and the infection has crossed 34 million. It's not a joke. And 1 million deaths, almost 1 lakh deaths in India, and we had already 2.2 lakh deaths in the United States of America. So the present scenario of the vaccines is not that much of, it is still scanty. We are in the preliminary phases. So as of now, there are 6 these vaccines which are in the clinical phase third, and 2 of them have been approved, but by bypassing those FDA guidelines and other regulatory guidelines because of the urgency. But out of them, only 2 are that who are the whole-based vaccines, and they are being developed in the China itself. And the China is not having a good track record of production of vaccines since 1950s. They had only produced 2 vaccines, successful vaccines, which they are using in their own countries. Except that you talk about the hundreds of vaccines which are being globally given, they are not from the China, even though they are giving us on subsidized rates each and everything. So we will talk about this first. If I want to start the lecture, that parasites are found in all groups of organisms. This we have to keep in mind. There is a successful co-evolution of these pathogens or parasites going on with us. There is they are co-evolving with us. Some are beneficial to us in one way or the other way. Some are causing harm at times to us, and we will go into this. And there is not even a single group of organisms which is not infested or infected with these parasites. When what we say as a parasite is actually, this is an association between the 2 organisms. We have among the parasites, we may be having the unicellular ones, that is the protozoans as we talk about, or we may be having the multicellular ones like that of the helminths or worms. Most protozoan parasites, although eukaryotic, inhabit intracellular spaces in their human host for at least one of their life cycle stages. So helminths, which on the other side are the multicellular eukaryotics, that can be quite large in their adult stage, up to 1 meter in the length. These organisms typically live and reproduce exclusively outside host cells, sometimes occupying host body cavities like the guts. These are some of the reasons why we are not developing an effective immune response against them. So if we move further, we see the reality behind the parasites is that we are having the infections from most of them all over the globe. There is not even a single continent, a single race which is not affected. If we talk about, we are having 1.3 billion persons infected with ascaris only. That is 1 in 4 persons on the earth. That is if we calculate the 6.5 billion population of the earth. Then similarly, we are having 300 million with CSS. Then we are having 100 million new malaria cases everywhere coming up. And this pie chart gives us an indication of the different types of diseases. And this, you believe in that we are having, if we talk about the total infections from these microorganisms and other parasites, these protozoans and helminths contribute about 25% of the total global load of infections, which is very huge. And viruses which have created the havoc at present, they include only 50% of those infections. So this pie chart gives an elaborated view, what is the present scenario of these infectious agents in terms of different species and genes. This gives us this bar chart gives an estimated worldwide prevalence of parasitic diseases. So if we talk about the hookworms, then trichuriasis, ascariasis, amoebiasis, malaria, and giardiasis, and many other diseases, we see they are there, and the number of each of them infections is more than 100 million. So this is huge. When we talk about the parasites, the types of the parasites and their infection prevalence and the types, and the another side of the image gives you an indication that there is not even a single organ in the body, major single organ in the body which is not being affected. Talk about the central nervous system, talk about the skin, the heart, the liver, the gut, the circulatory system or the systematics, talk about the lungs, the muscles. Almost they are making the entry into body through different parameters, as well as they can occupy or they can infect any part in the body. This is the route of the entry where we gain these parasites, because this is important to understand the infestation and the infection caused by these parasites before going to the molecular level, how they are causing havoc and what can be done to prevent them. So we are having the inhalations, we are having the fecal oral ingestion, we are having sexual contacts that can be spread. We talk about mostly the giardia and trichomoniasis, and they are the neglected diseases because the women are most sufferers of them because of vaginal dots and many other things. Those areas are prone to infection, even though there are certain microbiota which are helping them to prevent the infections, but still this is a huge number of women are suffering from these, and there are no treatments available actually for them once you have that infection. So vector-borne disease are obviously also there, and the contact and the penetration to the skin is also there. This chart gives you that details. When a person is now infected, we had started with the how much is the incidence or the prevalence of them. Then we had started the what organs they are infecting. Then we had again talked about the entry routes of those parasites into the system. And then once a parasite makes an entry into the system, it is obviously bound to cause certain signs and symptoms. Find the signs and symptoms. These are two different parameters. One is having subjective role, one is having objective, one is visible or understood by the doctor and one by the patient. So I hope that everybody understands what is the difference between the signs and the symptoms of a particular disease. So if you talk about, there is most of the things, you have inflammation when a parasite goes into the body. It causes the immune dysregulation, the bruxism, grinding of the teeth during the sleep. Then you are having the food cravings, joint muscle pain is there, anemia, low blood sugar, adrenal fatigue, and so on and so forth. Fine. If we talk about the immune response to multicellular worms, as we know that if the microbes or the pathogens they are making entry into the body, our body is having a huge number, a huge specific army within us, which is continuously making surveillance of the body, and they are trying to find if there is anybody obnoxious agent or a foreign pathogen which is making entry into the body. They are making a surveillance and then catching hold of that, then chopping down inside using the phagolysosome system and MHC molecules coming onto the cell surface, then presenting those antigens to the T cells for effective immune response generation. But as we know that most of the multicellular worms, that cannot be ingested by the phagocytes. So the problem is that there should be certain antigens which either the pathogen is going to shed, then the antigen presenting cells, the B cells or the macrophages or the dendritic cells are going to take up them, then present them, and then produce the antibodies, that is through B cell and TH cell interactions. One is those signal 1 and signal 2 interactions happen, then they produce the different types of antibodies, which then go and occupy the different antigenic sites on that particular multicellular worm, which against which those antibodies have been produced, and then they go for the anti-dependent cytotoxicity, and then there is allergic response produced, and so on and so forth. So activated eosinophils bind to IgE-coated parasites via the low affinity, that is Fc epsilon R2 receptors, which are mostly present on the phagocytic cells, and release their toxic contents onto the worm. Other effector cells bind to IgG-coated parasites. So then they eliminate the worm, because when they are delivering these toxic contents into the worm inside, and then they are getting rid of this. The second thing, if we talk about, when there are certain antigens which are being shed by a particular worm, they are being taken by the dendritic cells. But the problem is that once these antigens are there, they are causing the T cell to go into Th2 type of response, which is not desired. the most desired response is the Th1 response, where that is cellular response. And then another thing they are doing, they are inhibiting or switching the Th0 cell either to go towards Th1 or Th2 type of response. They are making it a T regulatory cell by activating the T-BET transcription factor, not activating the GATA3 transcription factor, which would have skewed the response towards Th1 cell. And in this, we are seeing that trigger the eosinophilia, that trigger the secretion of inflammatory mediators, IgE production, which is obviously the reason for the allergies, then the increased contractility, increased mucus production, increased permeability, and fibrosis, which is why the symptoms and the signs develop in the patient. We know about that in case of the intracellular pathogens, or those pathogens who are larger in size and cannot be phagocytosed, there is cell-mediated response is needed. That is the Th1, not the Th2 response, which is through the antibody molecules. I hope this is clear to most of you, because those who belong to the zoology and had an elementary knowledge of immunology, they know what is humoral response and what is cellular response. The cytokine is secreted by the T cell helps the B cell to multiply and mature into antibody producing cells. That is the plasma cells, and some of the plasma cells become the effector cells, and some of them go into the memory pool, and then they help us second time when there is secondary infection. These get activated directly, and this second immune response is very vigorous and it's very quick. Then we talk about, this is the Th2 cell effector function. I suppose this is not needed because most of you, we had talked about this and we know that how it takes place. And if somebody wants to go through this, I will give the presentation to them so they can go about it. Then similarly, there is a cellular response, which is desired in case of these protozoan infections or these parasitic infections. That is what the cells at the cellular level are involved, who can then go and interact with the particular pathogen or this parasite, and then deliver the inside contents like granzyme B, like many other factors or contents which are harmful to that particular parasite, and then cause its disintegration or whatever, so that it can be cleared from the system. So this is the Th1 effector response. If we talk about the Th1 and Th2 responses, usually Th1 is for intracellular antigen, that is immune response. It supports T cytotoxic activity, that is CD8 cells are getting activated. Stimulate nitric oxide production by the macrophages, which in turn act upon the parasite or this and then cause its elimination. Enhances specific immune recognition of antigen by induction of HLA genes, human leukocyte antigen associated genes, molecules on infected cells, and activation of the CD8 T cells. We know that the CD8 T cells are responsible for contact-based inhibition or killing of the parasites. So cytokines like IL-2, interferon delta, and interferon gamma, and as well as the TNF alpha, that is tumor necrosis factor alpha, these are the cytokines which are required in Th1 response, and they are getting generated, and that produce an effective response against most of the parasites. So whereas the Th2 response, which is the humoral response, usually is for extracellular antigen immune response, supports humoral response by inducing activation and proliferation of the B cells. And the cytokine which is of most important here is that of the IL-4, and besides the other cytokines. So we had to understand that if our body is able to evoke a strong immune response against the parasitic infections most of the time, but at times our body doesn't show an immune response which is strong enough to clear this pathogen from our body or clear, but instead of it uses the parasite itself on the one hand is trying to use its all the armory available before him or her to use against our system to successfully establish herself or himself. Similar way, our body is trying to reduce the burden or inhibit the activation or trying to clear this pathogen from the body. So there is a race going, survival of the fittest obviously is the norm, but here whichever one is the strong one that will win this competition. But there are certain reasons or factors which are responsible for this elimination or successful immune response generation. If we talk about the host, that is obviously the we people, it is the immune stats, That means if a person's immune system, which is dependent upon the geneticity, that is means genetic makeup, which is dependent upon the obviously the age, which is depending upon the underlying disease, that if you have got many secondary infections and then you are developing, because right now in the COVID-19 also there was a tussle between the central government and the Bengal government that those statistics produced every day that these many people died in this state because of the COVID-19 infections. But then the Bengal government fought it, and ultimately the statistics had now been segregated, that those people who died alone of the COVID-19 infections and those people who died because of any other comorbidity. That's what we are talking about here, underlying disease. If a person is already suffering because of the diabetes, because of any other secondary infection, then if the COVID-19 goes, immune system is already weak or it is immunocompromised, then the parasite will simply go and evoke this disease in that person. So underlying disease, that is if the secondary infections or you have got many infections throughout your life, so your immune system will be to some extent a little bit compromised, or if during that period you are suffering any other infection. So then there is obviously the nutritional stats. Remember that immune system cannot be boosted. However, we can supplement certain things, that is nutritional supplements can be added in order to increase the strength of those cells, but it cannot be boosted. Most of the time you are hearing the ads in the Google or in WhatsApp message, boost your immunity by this and this. Immunity cannot be boosted, but the cells of the immune system can be supplemented so that that evokes strong responses. Then there is obviously the genetic constitution of the individual. What is the genetic makeup of that individual? That also depends how you are going to generate an effective response against these parasites. Then there is defense mechanism of the host, obviously, what type of cells you are, what type of secondary infection you are having in all this. Then what are the parasitic factors which are responsible for successful evoking, that is the parasite will try to evade the host immune response. The factors there are mostly, that is the size. Normally those parasites are like usually we talk about the helminthes and many other, they are multicellular, they are large sized, hence they cannot be engulfed. So that is one of the reasons. Then route of entry. Route of entry is if it is not through your GI tract, which if the pathogen goes inside, then it can have it has to bear the basic brunt of the HCl, which is having a pH of 1.5. So when it goes from that, then it will go to the alkaline environment having more than pH of 10 to 11. So these two different parameters will not allow the pathogen to survive. But route of entry is different for different. And if there is HCl, those pathogens or those parasites have developed effective mechanisms to resist the digestion by the HCl, or by going from acidic medium to alkaline medium, they had developed those mechanisms. Then third is the frequency of the infection. Then another thing is that the parasitic load, how many parasites you are getting. If, for example, in terms of COVID-19 also, it depends upon what load of viruses you are acquiring at. Sometimes we are saying that the people, they are asymptomatic. Asymptomatic they are because the parasitic load or the viral load they have engulfed in them, that is very meager or very small, because of which their immune system was fighting with that, and that has come up with the solution, or that has come with an immune response, so I had to ward off this virus. But if the parasitic load is too high, too many cells of your body are getting infected at the same time, then your obviously your immune response will not be effective against those parasites. Then immune evasion mechanism of the parasites, they have developed a lot of immune evasive mechanisms, which we'll be discussing in the later half of this. So we understood from this that Th1 response or Th1, which one is required and why it is required. If we talk about the Th1 immune response, which is usually desired in case of those parasitic infections, that is, it is for the intracellular antigen immune response. It supports T cytotoxic activity, that is CD8 cytotoxic T cells are generated, which then go to the particular parasite, interact with that, and deliver the harmful contacts or toxic contents to that parasite, so that that gets disintegrated or is eliminated. Then similarly, there is antiviral effect in this case, stimulate nitric oxide production by the macrophage, which is not the case in the Th2 response. Similarly, enhance specific immune recognition of antigen by induction of human leukocyte adhesion molecules on infected cells and activation of CD8 T cells as well. So cytokines like IL-2, interferon gamma or delta, and TNF alpha, that is tumor necrosis factor alpha, they are produced in case of Th1 response, which is designed against these parasitic infections. On the other hand, if we talk about the Th2 response, which is not desired, it is usually the extracellular antigen immune response, which is mostly that the B cells are getting activated, they get converted to the plasma cells, they will produce the antibodies. These antibodies will come and then interact with the different types of pathogens, but they will require ultimately then the ADCC, that is antibody dependent cytotoxicity, and they will require the other cells of the immune of the host as well, which are a part of the immune system, like the dendritic cells, like the NK cells, like the macrophages, and so on, and as well as the CD8 T cells, that is cytotoxic T cells. So Th1 suppresses Th2 and vice versa. One is inhibitory for the other. Furthermore, there is a degree of antagonism. While one can be protective, the other acts as counterproductive, that is causing the pathology. So we know that for most of the parasites, we require Th1 response, but it is the mechanism employed by those parasites that they skew the response from Th1 to Th2 in order to successfully got established in that particular host. So immune response evoked by the parasites, if we talk about, that stimulate a variety of immune defense mechanisms in our body. We had understood that. Then parasitic infections are often chronic and affect many people. They are generally host specific and most cause chronic infections. Many are spread by invertebrate vectors and have complicated life cycles. As we know, in case of the different parasites, they have complicated vaccine. And these life cycles, they complete their life cycles in many hosts and so on and so forth. Their antigens are often stage specific, that is at merozoite stage, cryptomerozoite stage. If we talk about the malarial parasite, we are having a different stage, different sets of antigens, and it's not possible for the body to evoke the immune response against each and to ward off that pathogen from the body. So innate immune responses are the first line of the immune defense systems. T and B cells are pivotal in the development of immunity. Both CD8 and CD4 cells are required for this, which produce ultimately then the lot of cytokines, which activate many other cells of the immune system, which then ward off these parasites from the body. So parasites have many different escape mechanisms to avoid being eliminated by the immune system. Some exploit the host response for their own development. So the immune system of the host is being exploited by those parasites by different mechanisms, by immunosuppression, by antigenic drift and antigenic shift, by polymorphism, and many other means, that in order to develop themselves in the host and evade this immune response, which is otherwise effective and robust, generated normally. So inflammatory responses can be a consequence of eliminating parasitic infections as well. Parasitic infections have immunopathological consequences. These parasitic infections are associated with pathology, which can include autoimmunity, that is splenomegaly, and hepatomegaly, that is enlargement of these organs. Much immunopathology may be mediated by the adaptive immune response system, which is obviously that of the T cells and the B cells. So vaccines against human parasites are not yet routinely available. As we know, in case of the malaria, we still use that quinine drug from the cinchona tree. And then there are many others, but obviously we had not been able to develop a successful vaccine against the malaria because of the genetic polymorphism, because of the presence of the various stages during the malarial infection, various presence of various stages of the parasite during the various stages of the infection. Then there is antigenic drift, antigenic shift, and then there are this antigenic shedding of continuous antigens and development of new these membranes. That's also a hindrance in that malarial parasite development of the vaccine against the malarial parasite. Where in case in case of that of the viruses like HIV, We are also not able to successful because the mutation rate in case of HIV virus is very high, and we cannot go for separate sets of vaccines against each individual. Fine, which is not, unfortunately, not the case in case of the COVID-19, because the genetic mutations are very low. The rate of that is very low in case of the COVID-19. So we are expecting a vaccine can be developed. But in spite of that, in 1983, once the HIV/AIDS disease was discovered, and then after that, the continuous efforts have been there. There are billions of dollars pumped every time in the system by the NIH, by the different funding agencies across the globe. Same is the case with Indian funding agencies. And then there is Bill and Melinda Gates, which are sponsoring the lot of money for the two diseases, that is HIV/AIDS and that of the tuberculosis. Then if we talk about, apart from the size, what is the basic biological difference between bacterial pathogens and parasites, and how would this affect the way they are recognized by the immune system? Usually we know that the pathogens of prokaryotic origins, they have PAMPs in their cell walls, which are recognized by the PRRs of our antigen presenting cells. But what is present in these parasites which does not allow them a successful immune response to be generated against them? So how they are recognized by the body? The plasma membrane and the cell wall structures in bacteria are different. So they have distinct pathogen associated molecular patterns, or PAMPs, for which PRRs are there in our body systems, which recognize these PAMPs. In addition, protein synthesis that is initiated with formylmethionine, as we know, is different in case of the prokaryotes than in case of these eukaryotes. Parasites that have complicated life histories may express certain antigens only at a particular stage of development. That is what they try to shift the antigens which are visible to the immune system of the host. They give rise to a stage-specific immune response. For example, if one stage of a particular parasite has entered into the body of a host, it will generate one set of immune response. But by the time the immune system is fighting with that stage of the immune system, then the parasite has changed to a different stage. Then when the immune system has developed an immune response against that, it changed to a different stage, and then also continuously sheds different types of antigens. So it is actually confusing the immune system whom to fight and who is actually the, and in that confusion, they try to establish themselves. Thus, the protein coat of the sporozoite, for example, the infective stage of the malarial parasite, transmitted by the mosquitoes, induces the production of antibodies that do not react with the erythrocytic stage. So the different stage of the worm, for example, also display different surface antigens. Different parasites display different surface antigens at different points of time. So protozoa that are small enough to live inside human cells have evolved a special mode of the entries. Fine. The merozoite, the invasive form of the blood stage of the malarial parasite, bind to certain receptors on the surface of the erythrocyte and uses a specialized organelle, the rotropy, to enter the cell. Similarly, Leishmania species of the parasites which inhibit macrophages use complement and Fc crystallizable fragment receptors to, for example, Fc gamma R3 receptor, which is present on the macrophages, to encourage the cell to engulf them. Fine. Leishmania can also gain entry into the cell by using mannose receptors. Fine. So in addition to this, human gene polymorphisms that affect the outcome of the parasite infection. For example, there are certain gene polymorphisms. We know that of the sickle cell anemia. We know the polymorphisms in the Leishmania. We know the polymorphisms in the schistosomia or Ascaris even. For example, host resistance to parasite infection may be genetic, as we are evident. It's evident from these examples what I narrated, like Plasmodium sickle cell anemia or the hemoglobin. The parasite and on the right side is a genetic trait. For example, sickle cell hemoglobin protects from malaria certain MHC genes common in West Africans, but rare in Caucasians protect from malaria. Similarly, Duffy blood group antigen is negative erythrocytes protect from Plasmodium vivax. Similarly, if we talk about the Leishmania, there are genetic traits which make a host resistant to against a particular infection. For example, NRAMP1, which governs, this is genetic mutation in Leishmania in the people. Then similarly, there is candidate polymorphic gene to chromosome 5q31 to q33, a region that includes key cytokines like IL4 and IL5. Similarly, the Ascaris species. So these genetic traits make the people resistant to these type of infections. If we talk about the innate and adaptive immune systems that actually generate the robust immune system and allow the mammals to identify and eliminate parasites. Many different cells that are involved in generating innate responses, including the phagocytes, the NK cells, and the B cells as well. If we talk about this here, the IL-10 cytokine is working actually a negative regulator of the immune system, fine, in case of normal scenarios. But when these parasites enter our bodies, what they do, that skew the immune response from Th1 to Th2, then allowing that IL-10 cytokine production, because of which the immune system is redressed. The immune system is reduced, it's minimal, so that they successfully establish themselves within our bodies. So innate immune recognition relies on pattern recognition receptors, or that is PRRs, that have evolved to recognize pathogen-associated molecular patterns. Even though there are evidences that these parasites, multicellular, they also have certain PAMPs, but there are other systems by which our body recognizes them. So this here is a list that if there is helminths like PAMPs, lipoproteins act as the PAMPs over there, then protozoal PAMPs, that is GPI or hemozoin. The next table gives you a list of the PAMPs or these pathogen associated molecular patterns as are present in case of the microbial pathogens. Similarly, these parasites too have the PAMPs, which are being recognized by our body systems in order to generate an effective response. For example, the members of our family, that is family that is collectins or pentraxins or C-type lectins, scavenger receptors or complement receptors or toll-like receptors, they are the members which are present in our body. They are the TLR3, TLR2, TLR9, and these are toll-like receptors. Then MBL, mannose binding ligands, then CRP, C-reactive proteins, and there are the corresponding parasite ligands in case of the parasite which are present, fine, by which the parasite is being recognized by our body cells, and they are trying to establish an effector immune response against these parasites so that they can be eliminated from our bodies. Toll-like receptors, if we talk about that, how these toll-like receptor parasites or they recognize parasite molecules, and classical human PRRs also contribute to recognition of these parasites. A few studies have examined the role of TLRs in immunity to parasites. These are the data from some of the recent papers where they have shown that this T gondomini binds to TLR11 via proliferin and associates with TLR3, TLR7, and TLR9 via the endoplasmic reticulum protein UNC93B1. Similarly, TLR9 mediates innate immune activation by the malaria pigment hemozoin. Similarly, lyso or lyso-PS or phosphatidylserine from Schistosomia mansoni, this is an GPI anchor, and TC52 from Trypanosoma cruzi are capable of signaling through the TLR molecules. So if we were thinking that these parasites are not having the PAMPs, which was initially thought that it's why that established in our body successfully, but the recent studies have found that these parasites, even though they are multicellular or they are larger in size than the normal microbial pathogens, still they have the PAMPs on their surfaces, which are recognized by the PRRs of our body, and they are trying to generate a successful immune response against it. Similarly, there are the other PRRs and PAMPs which are found in these parasites are listed in the table as well. So then similarly, we have actually the T cell, which is playing the central role, or it's why that we call this as a helper T cell. As we all know, this is the cell which is being attacked by the most successful virus till date. We have the HIV. So HIV's GP120 interacts with the CD4 of our this immune cell, and it delivers its contents into that and destroys these CD4 T cells. And we say that a patient is HIV positive when the number of T cells in him or her is less than 200 per cubic millimeter of the blood. So that we know if the number of T cells is reduced below 200 in that particular person, we say that he is confirmed case of HIV or he's HIV positive. But we know that the number of CD4 T cells in our body is very high. Why this attacks? Why it is the most successful? Because it destroys the central and key element of our immune system, which is the T helper cell. It's known as T helper cell because it helps almost all other cells by direct or indirect way, either producing certain factors or directly interacting with them. So it helps all other cells of the body to generate an effective immune response. So foreign antigens are presented to T helper cells for identification because the T cells cannot recognize the naive antigens. So the parasite had to be engulfed, or the antigens from the parasite had to be engulfed. Then they had to be presented along with their MHC content or MHC self-MHC molecules to the corresponding T cell for which the antigen was there. As we also know that we have a huge diversity of T helper cells in our body, which tunes to the range of 10 raised power 9. Huge diversity. Almost there is a T cell for every possible antigen on the earth. Fine, but there are certain questions regarding this which the immunology has not been able to answer, that if a smart chemist tomorrow starts developing a different chemical molecule, will our body be able to generate an effective immune response against that? There are certain studies going on, but we right now don't know what will be. If there is 10 raised power 9 diversity of them, maybe the diversity is more, or if tomorrow a different molecule is being produced by a smart chemist, whether our body will be able to produce an effective immune response against that or not. So so from this slide, it is clear that, for example, when a pathogen enters the body, it is being chopped down, it is being presented along with MHC molecules, then to the TCR interacts with it, T cell gets activated, but until there is not a second set of signal, which we call as the co-stimulatory signal, because that signal is important in terms of the parasite effective immune response. Again, although in all other infections it is important, but in case of the parasites it's important because parasites try to modulate the co-stimulatory molecules on the surface of the antigen presenting cells, or they try to downregulate the expression of these. So there is one strategy right now in the pipeline with many studies, that if you are able to actually stimulate or activate the immunomodulatory, these co-stimulatory molecules on the surface of different cells, then the parasite may not be able to successfully, or any other infection may not be able to successfully evolve in our bodies. Fine. So there was a study conducted where it was shown that what is the role of these T cells in case of different parasite infections. While they had shown that the Trypanosoma cruzi and Plasmodium yeoli and then and brasiliensis, these three were used in those studies. If you look at the graphs, these blue lines show in every graph, if, for example, the x-axis shows the days after infection, while as the y-axis shows the load of these parasites per cubic millimeter of the blood. If we talk about the Trypanosoma cruzi, you see that initially when those mice were used which don't have the T cells, or simply that the nude mice, we are using the nude mice which doesn't have these. They are called nude because the gene responsible for the development of the hair on the mice is also linked to that of that gene. So once you delete that region, the mice which are without thymus, they will be also without the hairs. So it's whether we call them as the nude mice. So when those nude mice were used for the experimental purposes and given the infection with Trypanosoma cruzi, these remember that these all infections like that of the T. cruzi and T. yeoli and brasiliensis, they are not usually those much notorious infections, or they are not able to develop these strong infections in the body so that a person can die. But when you see that these T cells were lacking in these mice, immediately after days they died. But the normal mice who were having the T cells, that means when they were having the T cells, they survived. Similarly, in case of Plasmodium yeoli, if you talk about the red line, it is that those mice which where nude mice were not having the thymus. Once they were not having the thymus, they were having no T cells at all in their bodies. So once you give infection to those mice and you give infection to the normal mice also, those mice who were not having the T cells, they died immediately, while as because it takes 5 to 7 days to develop an effective immune response normally. So when your body is exposed to a particular infection first time in life, your body, that is what we call as the primary immune response, it takes 5 to 7 days for development. It's why that we also take the antibiotics from 5 to 10 days, not beyond that. It cannot be, you cannot take antibiotics for a month altogether continuously, right? So this is what, but in case of certain ailments, that is the requirement in case of immunosurveillance things, when you are going for transplantation things, so that your body, you are being continuously given the immunosuppression or different types of drugs. So this third experiment also shows that once the mice who were having the T cells, they recovered slowly within 5 days or abruptly, but those mice who were not having any T cell in their bodies, they died immediately. This showed that T cells play an important role in development of an effective immune response against the parasites. So this slide shows that if you are having a strong Th1 response, you are showing, because the GATA3 and the T-bet or the ROR gamma T, these are the 3 different transcription factors, or AHR for that matter. So these, once the TH cell is there, initially the TH0 cell, as we had discussed in the previous slides, it is an initiator cell, it is a virgin cell. Once it is activated, it is interacting with a particular pathogen. Depending upon which transcription factor or which signaling cascade, it's not dependent upon a single factor, it is dependent upon a number of factors. And those number of factors, their concentration, their quantity, and their signaling time determines which transcription factor in that TH0 cell should be activated so that an effective immune response is generated against a particular pathogen. So if T-bet transcription factor is activated, you are having the Th1 immune response. You will be having generation of interferon gamma, which will activate the macrophage, and you will be having the protection against that particular pathogen. And if, for instance, Th2 cell, the GATA3 transcription factor is activated, the cell gets skewed towards Th2, and then you are having the IL-5, the eosinophilia, and still in case of the helminths, not in case of protozoans, you are having a productive immune response. But in case of if Th17 is getting activated, and in addition to that Th17, there is IL-10 cytokine is also being produced, and then it gives an inhibitory immune response, and you are having a pathology instead of having a productive immune response. So these are the different subsets of TL. For example, similarly, there is Th22 cell. We are having almost many types of Th cells depending upon which transcription factor gets activated by which set of signals, not by a single cell, so that we will be having a strong or effective immune response. For example, the Louis Pasteur almost 100 years back gave us different types of concepts, and by that time already Robert Koch had discovered that these pathogens in 1883, that those, before that earlier it was known that those infectious disease are caused by foul air and mud and those bad air and foul smell coming from somewhere, or they may be because of the bad waters. But nobody was knowing that they are actually the pathogens are the microbes. But the classical experiments by Robert Koch proved that those are the infectious agents or the pathogens, those which cause the infectious diseases. And then the classical works were done by the Louis Pasteur and Edward Jenner and many others. Still, we have this problem. It was talked about by Dr. Khurshid, my dear friend, that they are co-evolving with us, and we cannot eliminate a particular pathogen or a particular species from us. If, for example, we are right now eliminating one particular pathogen or parasite, then tomorrow next may get up. So we had to learn how to co-evolve with them. Fine, I will be talking about the last slides how that can be achieved. So advancing age of the patient as they are more prone to infections. One of the reasons for this is use of sophisticated and complicated equipments which is not easy to clean, disinfect, or sterilize. Then increasing specialization, bringing together patients susceptible to some type of infection. Increased use and trial use of antibiotics, which is resulting in drug resistance. And we know in our world countries how the antibiotics are easily available. And for small, mild infections, even doctor recommends. And we also usually go to the pharmacies and get these drugs, because that is one of the causes of which is responsible for drug resistance menace. Third thing is that the higher rate of staff turnover makes it difficult to maintain uniform standards in our hospitals, because which are the centers of dissemination of these infections, even the environmental infections, as well as the infections to the communities. Then effective sterilization system as yet not fully understood by all the concerned, how to use the sterilize. Even if we talk about that how to wash your hands, we are not able to at this stage that how actually we should wash the hands, for what period of time, what kind of soap and other thing we should use for effective elimination of the pathogen or preventing ourselves from this. So what is immune evasion? These parasites we were talking about till that how an immune system is generated or developed with some latest that these PAMPs discovered here and there, and people are trying now to target those PAMP molecules which are present in those parasites and try to create successful immune response against them. But immune evasion is a mechanism which is being employed by those parasites in order to. So even if we were having the immune response, there should be effective response against those parasites, and that should be eliminated from our body. There should be no successful infection, so that this parasite should be able to survive in our bodies. But there are certain mechanisms employed, as I talked to you already. There are certain mechanisms utilized or employed by these parasites to evolve in our bodies. Some of the factors favoring invasion of immune or this favoring evasion of the immune response or helping the parasite in successfully developing in our bodies are, one is that they are having a large size of the parasite. As I told you, some may be having the size of up to 1 meter, which remain in the cavities or in different cavities of the body. Then complex life cycles, some are completing the life cycle in 1 or 2 hosts. Then there are different stages of the life cycle. The infectivity stages are different. That is making it cumbersome. And this is one of the strategy utilized by these parasites to evade the immune responses. Then third is the long duration inside the host to complete the life cycle. Then another is the antigenic complexity, because a lot of antigens are being here shed, and a lot of antigens are coming on the surface of the parasites now here and there. So that is also making. So evolutionary adaptations give parasites their ability to evade and resist immune responses. So some parasites survive and replicate inside the cells. Others develop cysts that are resistant to the immune responses. Antigenic, some granulomas are being also developed. Cyst formation is also being developed around themselves, which prevents them from our immune system to clear them. Antigen masking is an effective form of immune response evasion by some of the parasites. Then parasites can develop a tegument that is resistant to damage by antibodies and complement, or even the cytotoxic T lymphocyte contents. That was why we talk about the cytotoxic T cells are even not able to eliminate a particular parasite from our system. So protozoan immune evasion, there are protozoans, there are helminthes, then there are many other parasites. If we talk about the protozoan immune evasion strategies, which are employed by these protozoans to evade the immune response, they are the parasites may live intracellular, avoid host immune response. Second is that plasmodium inside RBCs. When infected, it's not recognized by TC cells and NK cells. Other states of plasmodium are inside liver cells. So it is using intracellular this mode of residing inside the host, which is not allowing the immune system cells to go and bind to these particular antigens and to develop an immune response. Leishmania parasites and Trypanosoma cruzi lives inside the macrophage, so making it inaccessible to different types of antibodies and cells. But inside the macrophage, still it does not allow the phagosome lysosome maturation, so that then those antigens will be chopped down, they will be present on MHC molecules, and immune response can be generated. But they inhibit the phagosome lysosome fusion, even they are engulfed by the these macrophages. Similarly, anatomical seclusion in invertebrate hosts like Plasmodium ukinites in cirral membrane beyond reach of the hemocytes. Antigenic variation, for example, in Plasmodium, different stages of life cycle express different antigens. Antigenic variation also in extracellular protozoans. For example, African trypanosomes, one surface glycoprotein that covers parasite for VSG, immunodominant for antibody response. Then host mounts immune response to current VSG, but parasite already switching VSG to another type of VSG. So this is antigenic drift, antigenic shift within the host that is also causing problems in generating the immune response. And this is a strategy employed by the protozoans to evade the immune response. Shedding, replacement of the surface antigens in case of Antimoeba histolytica, for example, immunosuppression is one of the mechanisms, manipulation of host immune responses, like in case of the Plasmodium, anti-immune mechanisms, that is Leishmania, antioxidases to counter macrophage oxidative burst. For example, if the macrophage is producing the nitric oxide or the different another oxides for killing of the parasite, but this Leishmania is producing antioxidases to counter the macrophages, this oxidative burst. Elements similarly also employ a lot of this immune evasive mechanisms. For example, their large size makes them difficult to eliminate. Primary response is inflammation. Often worms are not eliminated. Then the second, coating with host proteins. Tegument, cestodes, and trematodes absorb host components, for example, RBC antigens. Similarly, immunological appearance of the host tissues, they are appearing like that, or that is what we call as the molecular mimicry type of thing. That is, they are appearing that they are the membranes of the parasite is resembling to that of the host tissue. Similarly, worm is seen as the self. Molecular mimicry, parasite mimics host structure or function, which is this molecular mimicry is in most of the cases responsible for generation of autoimmunity. Similarly, then anatomical exclusion, one nematode larva does this for inside mammalian cells, shedding replacement of the surface antigens, then immunosuppression or manipulation of the immune system is another reason. Immune evasion, for example, if we talk about a particular parasite that is Antiamoeba, it disrupts the NADPH oxidase activity and inhibits this respiratory burst to avoid oxidative stress. This is a recent study. I have taken the excerpts from that study, what shows the surface protein peroxidioxin or kills neutrophil by generation of NADPH oxidase derived ROS mechanism. So it in turn the neutrophil will have killed this parasite. It is killing the neutrophil itself. Similarly, the macrophage inhibits respiratory burst and nitric oxide production by the macrophages. Similarly, then GAL lactin sequence cross reacts with MAC inhibitory proteins. So those inhibitory proteins produced by the complement system in our body, it's inhibiting their activity. Cysteine protease leaves C3A and C5 ineffective. Similarly, cysteine proteases cleave circulating these immunoglobulin A and immunoglobulin G, that is serum immunoglobulins. Similarly, there is surface antigen that is shedding of the surface proteins as well. So then in addition to that, it is also modulating the immune response by the parasites. The host's immune response, if it is generated, then the different types of antigens which are being produced by different types of antigens by these worms, they are then going and binding to the different antigenic presenting cells. For example, here the dendritic cell, and they are modulating those cells. Instead, that in a normal immune response, if this PAMP is being recognized by PRR in dendritic cells, it should then generate Th1 response, and then cellular cytotoxicity or CD8 T cell should get generated, or GATA3 this T-BET transcription factor should get activated, and it should produce an immune response. But it is modulating the immune response in that dendritic cells, and instead of Th1 response, it is giving that towards the Th2 response. You see here, from instead of producing Th1 or interferon gamma cytokines, it is producing IL-4 and and making the cell Th2, or it is going towards the T regulatory cells, which produces IL-10 and TGF-beta. And then it in turn inhibits the immune response of the host, which would have then again killed this parasite. So this immunomodulation is another mechanism which is being employed by the parasites in order to evade the immune responses. Similarly, here, if you see that a parasite which is inside the lumen, adult worm, it is creating certain antigenic proteins. For example, worm products are there, or cell surface antigens are there. Then they are going to the T regulatory cells. T regulatory cells is activating, or for example, another worm is there which is entering into the this epithelium, crossing the epithelium barrier and into the system. Then these responses, instead of generating a cellular immune response, it is generating a antibody or humoral immune response, which is not required. So this is again a modulation of the immune response, which is not allowing the effective immune response against these parasites. One of the biggest challenges posed to the immune response by most parasites is their complicated life cycle, leading to change in the antigenic structure and location over time. Therefore, the most effective immune response will depend on the type of the organism, the location of the infection, and the life cycle stage of the parasite. For example, if we talk here about trypanosomas, the surface of the trypanosoma parasite is covered with a variable surface glycoprotein, or we call it as a VSG. So several unusual genetic processes generate extensive variation in these surface structures, enabling the organism to escape immunological clearance. An individual trypanosoma carries a large repertoire of these VSG genes, each encoding a different VSG primary sequence. So there is genetic polymorphism, but the trypanosome expresses only a single VSG gene at one time. So activation of a VSG gene results in duplication of the gene and its transposition to a transcriptionally active expression site at the telomeric end of a specific chromosome. So activation of a new VSG gene displays the previous gene from the telomeric expression sites. So trypanosomas have multiple transcriptionally active these expression sites, so that a number of VSG genes can potentially be expressed. Unknown control mechanism limit expression to a single VSG expression site at a time. Thankfully, we are not having that. There is an unknown transcriptional mechanism which is limiting the expression of only one variable surface glycoprotein at a particular time in case of trypanosoma parasite. Otherwise, if this unknown control mechanism would not have been there, it is limiting the expression to a single VSG expression site. Otherwise, there would have been n number of VSG sites for which our body would have been confused to generate an effective immune response. If this is the VSG1, VSG2, and so on and so forth. So these are the if even a single variant expression of a particular VSG generates a totally different parasite. So even if you see these are the three in this example, these are the three variants: VSG1, VSG1, and then VSG2, and then there is VSG3. If you see about approximate time after CC fly bite, and this x-axis shows the response after the weeks when the CC fly has injected that trypanosoma in your body, and this shows the million of trypanosomes per millimeter of the blood, millions. And if you talk about, then all the three variants are found in case of the patient. So which against what our immune system would have cleared about a particular thing, you are not sure when this antigenic drift and shift is continuing, and your body is producing a lot of antibodies and wasting the energy and resources against a particular parasite. A parasite number increases after infection, and effective humoral response develops to the VSG covering the surface of the parasites. These antibodies eliminate most of the parasites from the bloodstream, both by complement-mediated lysis and by opsonization and subsequent phagocytosis, which is a normal immune response. Similarly, cystomiasis, that is low antigenicity and large size, pose unique challenge to immune detection and elimination of the helminths. Fine. So this is the life cycle of the helminths. If we talk here about this infective stage and diagnostic stage, so these antigenic variations pose a threat to even detect this particular type of infection in a particular person. Then immune response. An immune response does develop to the cystomeiosis, but it is usually not sufficient to eliminate the adult worm. Instead, the worm must survive for up to 20 years, causing prolonged morbidity for a particular individual. So all cystosome worms have several unique mechanisms that protect them from immune defenses. These include decreasing the expression of the antigens on their outer membrane and enclosing themselves in a glycolipid and glycoprotein coat derived from the host. So masking the presence of their own antigens. So those antigens, when they are not available, when they are being masked by the parasite itself, they are not available to the host immune system for development of effective immune responses. Among the antigen observed on the adult worms are the host own ABO blood groups and histocompatibility antigens, that is HLAs. The immune response is, of course, diminished by this covering made of the host self antigens, which contributes to the long life persistence of these organisms inside a human host. Similarly, low antigenicity and large size pose unique challenge to them to develop. One more interesting phenomenon I had come across in the recent Trends journal, this paper has been published, that parasites and viruses can join the hands together and then disrupt the body's immune balance. Otherwise, there is an immune balance in the body and a pathogen goes inside the body, immune response is being produced. Even if it is not producing sufficient enough to eliminate the parasite out of the body, still the parasite establishes itself successfully, but remains in a dormant stage or remains in a latency, period of latency. As the classical example of the latency is that of the tuberculosis. Once the Mycobacterium tuberculosis H37 bug goes inside the body of a host, if our body is having an effective immune response, it tries to suppress or show immune response against that bacteria. But our body, if it is it's weak because of the secondary infections, or then it develops an infection. But our immune response, if your immune response is very strong, you are not allowing the Mycobacterium tuberculosis to divide and cause a disease, active disease in a person. What happens in 95% of the cases who are infected with the Mycobacterium tuberculosis bug, 95% of them develop latent infection. That is, they go under latency phenomena, where the pathogen engulfs itself by the mucus, by the secretion, by and forms a granuloma type of structure around or encapsulates itself, so that this our immune system things are not able to cause any harm to that pathogen. But there is a continuous surveillance of our body going on. Whenever the pathogen feels that the immune system of that particular host is now diminished in the old age because of secondary infections, because of many other comorbidities, then it tries to establish. It's why that the tuberculosis is generated in most of the people in the old age, when their bodies, their immune system is in a compromised stage because of many secondary infections, because of old age, because of nutritional deficiencies, and so on and so forth. So this new trend has their parasites and viruses that can join the forces to disrupt the body's immune balance. For example, we know that we are having a parasite inside our body that has already skewed the immune response from Th1 to Th2. Th1 was desired so that a cell-mediated or cellular immune response would have got generated and the pathogen would have got eliminated. But instead, what they are doing, they are skewing the immune response from Th1 response to Th2 response. So that is a worrisome trend. There are two types of T cells, as we had discussed, that Th1 and Th2, but actually there is a Th0 cell which is not divided or differentiated. When the signals are being posed onto that cell, Th0 cell, depending upon whether T-bet transcription factor or GATA3 transcription factor will get activated. If GATA transcription factor gets activated, the cell will go to Th2 type and it will start producing IL-4 cytokine mainly, which will give rise to the humoral response in the form of the antibodies. But if T-bet transcription factor is activated, Th1 cell will be generated. It will start producing the IL-2 and interferon gamma. IL-2 acts as a proliferation factor because there has to be clonal proliferation of those cells. So how the Th1 and Th2 cells function depends on the cytokines they secrete, as I told you. So cytokines are small proteins that have a specific cell signaling effect. So Th2 type cells play a vital role in the immune response against invading parasitic worms. A parasitic infection throws off the T cells immune system balance, increases Th2, decreases Th1, which was required. So Th2 dominant immune regulation leads to reactivation of the dormant viruses and dampens Th1 antiviral response. Because if you are harboring a virus that is in dormant stage and the virus has established itself in our bodies and we are not able to generate effective immune response. But if the parasitic infection has occurred to the same person, what happens that this virus, which was in the dormant stage, it was suppressed by the body's Th1 immune response. So when the parasites are skewing the response from Th1 to Th2, so Th1 response was keeping that virus under check. But as the parasite has now skewed the immune response from Th1 to Th2, this virus is getting reactivated or it is getting activated. So when viruses can reactivate and replicate freely, that is the worrisome trend. And in case of the COVID-19, if we have the virus, our immune system is able to keep at bay or under check. But as we are seeing, the most of the patients are nowadays coming asymptomatic. That means our system is sufficient enough trying to inhibit that. But that antiviral response is through Th1 cells. But God forbid if a person who gets infected with a parasite who skews the response during this infection or the co-infection of that parasite occurs simultaneously with that of any viral infection, which will skew the response from Th1, that is cellular response, to Th2, humoral response, then this virus can replicate freely, and that can, or if there is any dominant virus within the cell, that dormant virus can get activated or reactivated, and that is a worrisome trend. So parasitic infections, if in a nutshell, they are problematic enough in themselves. But when parasites partner with viruses, as in the cases I had told you above, the situation can worsen dramatically as the partners disrupt the balance of the function of the immune system. If you don't address the parasite first, it can make it extremely challenging to overcome the viral infection. So parasites, in case of even COVID-19 infection, there has been papers in the Lancet as well in the medical journal, New England Medical Journal, where they had shown that the parasite, it is imperative to address the parasitic infection if somebody is infected with parasite simultaneously as well as with that of the viral infection. So these pathogens cause change in the immune responses that can provide a more friendly environment for the parasites and viruses to thrive, particularly by modifying, as I had discussed. A parasitic infection shifts the immune system function to Th2 dominance, lowering Th1 immunity, which is required in antiviral immunity, which is required in cellular immunity. The lowered Th1 immunity allows the viruses within the body to replicate and go relatively uncontrolled as they are no longer kept in check by strong Th1 actions. So I think the ultimate solution to this is that we have to have infection control and antibiotic, that this antibiotic resistances or those we have to keep in check. So antibiotic forces as well as this infection control we have to have. For example, if we use the medical practitioners who are more vulnerable to infections, or paramedical staff, or those working in the research laboratories in BSL-3 labs, that is biosafety level 3 or biosafety level 4 labs, they need to take precautions to control the infection within those systems. So that those, for example, earlier it was said that Wuhan is having one of the biggest viral research laboratories in its proximity. And it was earlier said that there was a theory going on that the infection of the COVID-19 has been there since 2019 January, and then that laboratory was closed. The phone numbers of those scientists who were working there, they were not traceable since February or March 2019, and then China was knowing exactly about it, that this is happening, but they didn't tell the world. This was whether it was a conspiracy theory or something else. We don't want to go over there, but we surely know that if something happens wrong, in case we are having the nuclear disasters, like we have the Chernobyl, this radioactive leakage, we have similarly the Fukushima in 2012 in Japan, where we have a radioactive spillage, and those where a lot of attention was paid to them. But similarly, we are having enough number of that is hundreds of laboratories across the globe who are working. Some are working in the biological warfare arena, some are working in the modification of the different viruses, and so on and so forth. So these biological agents or obnoxious agents can be used as a bioweapon. We had to have them in control, especially those people who are working in the hospitals or those research laboratories. They have to take the infection control measures, have to make infection control committees within their institutions, either the hospitals or those research laboratories. And the antibiotic forces, they are actually the backbone if they want to reduce this infection spread. There was a scientist we need to pay him to a tribute, that is Ignaz Semmelweis in 1818 to 1865, who was make mockery with because he gave a concept at that time which was not acceptable, because Robert Koch in 1883 discovered that it is the pathogens which cause actually the diseases and not any other agent, the bad air and the foul smell or the muddy water and all those. So he at that time established that high maternal mortality, because those pregnant women who were getting operated upon and there was childbirth, there was a lot of mortality associated with them. So he established that high maternal mortality was due to failure of doctors to wash hands after postmortems or the normal surgeries. But and that had reduced maternal mortality by 90%. But he was ignored and ridiculed by colleagues at that time. So this brings us to the basic principle of hygiene, cleanliness, and infection controls. If we talk about, first thing we have to ask about, most of the entries are through mouth or are through skin. And once we are in contact with through our hands, through our nose, and that is what we call as the T area of our body, that is these eyes and the nose and the mouth. This is more vulnerable to infections, and our body gets infected when the pathogen or the parasite or any other thing makes then there are skin through, then another other openings, but most vulnerable are the hands. So if you are able to take care of your hygienic hand wash conditions, so we as a Kashmiris, it's on the lighter note that we had started to wash and the hands now, and most of our bathrooms now contain the liquid Dettol soaps and all. Earlier we didn't use to take care about it. Even in marriage we used to go simply and we used to wash the hands with the soap at the end of the function after eating anything. Before eating that, we were not washing with the soap and all this. But now we had developed a cult, thanks to the coronavirus, for that we are now becoming hygienic and we are taking care of the due hygiene of our bodies. How to wash your hands properly. Even we, as at the helm of affairs, we also don't know how to wash the hands. We go and wash the hands with the soap. Okay, maine haath dho liye sabun se. But there is a particular chronology how you had to wash your. Even if you want to wash your hands, there is a simple phrase we call as SUMANK, Suman K. Suman is the name, you add K to that, Suman Kumar, K for Kumar. Suman is as you had to wash hands first, applying the water to the first. What we go normally, we go and take the dispenser, we take the soap, but first we had to wet our hands with the water, then we had to take the soap, then we had to use Sida. S means Sida, that is we had to rub our hands through normal coats, that is Sida. Then we had to do this SU, as U means Ulta, we had to rub these hands in between, Ulta. And then M means muthi. Then we have to wash our hands like this, muthi. Fine. Then there is N. N is for nails. The most of the infectious agents thrive in these nails. We have to wash or rub our nails on the thumb, on the palm of both the hands. So nails, and when we are done with the nails, then there is angutha. Fine. When there is angutha, that is both the thumb has to be rubbed on both the sides. Then there is kalai, K. K is then kalai. That means we have to wash this one, and this Suman K is the beautiful procedure how we can. And then at least we have to wash our hands not less than 30 seconds. Minimum of then it is only then that the soap detergent will disintegrate the membranes of the virus or the pathogen if it has to be at least for 30 seconds. So you had to be washing your hands not less than 30 seconds, then it will be having an effective control. With this, I thank all of you because I don't want to stretch it. It has already been stretched and we're supposed to have this for 40 minutes, but we are already by 3. It's a 3-hour seminar instead of 2. So if you have certain questions, I would love to take those and try to answer them if I am able to.
Thank you, Dr. Manzoor, for excellent talk. It was nice to listen from you. And you have discussed different immune responses, which we see from helminth parasites, and you also discussed, new advances in immunology. Basically, you are discussing immunology in relation to helminth parasitic diseases, helminth parasite especially. So your discussion, basically why we need to have more advances in immunology, because as Dr. Manzoor and Dr. Khurshid were mentioning that we are, receiving emerging diseases, and sometimes parasitologists call them superbugs. And we are now having these super parasites, which we need to know, understand different immunological aspects. Then we can be able to have any successful medicine or vaccine against them. So now this session is open for discussion. Is Dr. Khurshid with us? Dr. Khurshid? Because I want both of you to be here. Dr. Khurshid?
Yes, I am available.
Okay. So,
yes, Dr. Umar, I am here.
Want us to ask a live question? I am taking live questions for now. He can raise his hand. I think we have one here, one student. Burhan, are you hearing me?
Yes, Assalamualaikum, sir.
Okay. You can ask your question. Okay.
First of all, thank you so much, Dr. Manzoor. This was a very nice talk for us, and we got to learn a lot of things. Sir, I have 2 queries. First, people are saying that even they are neglecting that precaution which you told just a few minutes ago, like washing hands and all that, and they are more thrusting on herd immunity. They are saying it will be the ultimate solution for this COVID. And recently, I also saw some Indian scientists. They had also proposed this herd immunity. I want to learn from you that is it a better solution?
This is a good question. There are still many schools of thought which are talking about the herd immunity. The best example from them, among them, was the Sweden and the Netherlands, who adopted this strategy from the start of this pandemic. They didn't went for long shutdowns and so on and so forth. But keeping in view the population of ours, India or the countries who are having a huge population with the infrastructure and the close proximities, ultimately this will be a good solution. But by the time, if we only rely on the herd immunity, by that there will be a huge toll, there will be millions of deaths. If we would not have taken precautions earlier, the lockdowns, the healthcare system was not. Herd immunity doesn't mean that we are leaving it all to the mercy of Almighty Allah, that without taking any precautions, going for vaccine development, these things will simultaneously go side by side. And on the other side, you are allowing those asymptomatic patients, those who are developing the immunity their own, to spread this, and slowly, maximum number of people can get immunity in your community. That is, if 60 to 70% of the people will get immune to this, then they will take care of the 40%, the remaining, or 30 to 40% of the remaining people. But this is a solution, but it is not the only solution. It doesn't mean we should leave it to the herd immunity only, but we should strive for other things also. If there are certain antiviral therapies can be available, the immunotherapy can be available, or the vaccines, if it is possible, it can be produced. So then simultaneously a collaborative approach will be used to defeat this virus. because every pathogen dies its own, but we have to minimize the level of damage. Level of damage had to be minimized. It's not that we had seen in the past the Spanish flu virus. We have seen many viruses which had created havoc. Then ultimately at that time, the science was not so much advanced as we are now talking about the vaccine development in 6 months. We are pumping billions of dollars. Every country, there is a race going on for the vaccine development. In earlier age, in 1920s, when Spanish flu was there, we were not able to do that. Neither there was communication. So that virus too died of its own death. The herd immunity is going to take care of it. But at present times, we cannot rely only on the herd immunity. The other approach had also simultaneously to go so that we can overcome from this problem. I hope I had answered you to some extent.
Burhan, do you have any other question? Okay. Okay. I have another question which earlier I did not ask. I have a question for Dr. Khurshid. The question is from Umar Hamid from Department of Zoology. He's a PhD scholar. If we say parasite eradication is by far not a useful exercise, what about natural processes that is going on to keep a check which might have eradicated millions of parasites, may be useful to human beings?
Well, this is a very valid question. In fact, when we talk of the parasite eradication or extinction, whether it is naturally happening or it is enforced by man. Now, see, what I was basically emphasizing during my talk, extension is operating in two ways, right? It might be operating naturally and man is also enforcing this. But we have to believe whatever happens naturally, that is with a defined purpose. That I was telling you that everything happens under the control of within the ambit of nature as per the principles of natural selection. If human beings are Homo sapiens, we are because of natural selection, we are not Homo habilis now, right? So whether the species is evolving or it is adjusting to the environmental conditions, or a species is getting extinct, or some of its members are getting eliminated, why not all? These are natural decisions. And when we talk of the natural decisions, we are basically obeying the basic ecological principles of survival. You see, we talk about the natural fitness, survival of the fittest, struggle for the existence. These concepts, although were given way back by Darwin, but they are still existing. So if nature has certain thing decided for a particular biological agent or a species, nature will accordingly modulate or change the scenario within that particular species, in its individuals, in its members, in its populations. So the point you have raised, very good question, is so now, if the species extinction is happening naturally, man has nothing to do, but what man can do is, sometimes we say, anthropogenic pressures. Because of anthropogenic pressures, what could happen naturally in the course of 100 years, it might happen within the course of 10 years. So it might accelerate the process what nature has planned for so many years. Man is trying to bring it quite fast. So that is why we are saying that sixth mass extinction, that is basically happening this time, that is under process. It is anthropogenic mass extinction. Abhi tak jo 5 mass extinctions, most of the species have went extinct from this earth. So those were all natural phenomena. Nature has decided something, so it is a destruction for some biological agent, it is a creation for. In replacement, nature gets a new species into existence. But as far as our this parasite eradication programs are concerned, when we are doing it as per the human greed and the unnatural, what is called as perspectives. We are basically not knowing what this particular parasite species, which is under the target of elimination or so we are basically forgetting what this species under the target of elimination might be doing under the natural conditions. But if the nature does the same, it might be different. So we cannot basically match with the nature, because nature does what is life, whatever life is nature. It is manifested everywhere. So what is happening under natural conditions, that has a different thing to what's basically offered to the ecosystem services. But what is being basically promoted or accelerated by the anthropogenic activities or man-enforced programs, they have a great bearing because we are silent about the ecological services. We are not knowing those things basically. So that is how it is. It can be differentiated that the man and for otherwise I was telling you that by 2070 up to 30% of the helminth parasites may be extinct because the host animals, host living organisms will become automatically extinct. So these are the natural things. We have nothing to do with them. Neither we can stop them, but what we are doing, we can accelerate them. Because of anthropology, you see the natural process of the lakes. When you talk of the oligotrophic, eutrophic, naturally it may take years together, hundreds of years together for a lake. But because of human pressures, pollution, we are accelerating the process. So same thing might happen with the parasite elimination or eradication. If we are enforcing it through our activities, through our greed, through our unnatural means, so that will have a repercussion, that will have a bearing on the ecosystem of which the parasites are the part. So I think this is all what I can reply to your question. And I hope I will have somehow try to satisfy your query. If still there is something you want to get cleared from my viewpoint, so I'll be ready to again deliberate upon this.
Thank you, Dr. Khurshid, for your answer. We have this Burhan al-Haq again online. Okay, Burhan.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Sir.
you can ask your next question.
Yes, sir. It's again to Dr. Manzoor.
Okay.
Sir, it's about, like I was thinking, for example, we get immunoglobulin G, it crosses placenta and reaches us during our fetal life. Is it possible to, it is right to say that the mothers who are more exposed to certain kind of antigens, and even this, say, for example, she had previously been detected of corona positive, is it possible that she will impart some extra features to the fetus? He will be more resistant to the such kind of infection.
I think Dr. Manzoor is muted. Whenever.
A minute, just.
Yes.
Okay.
Fine. Yes. So
now
as of now, as I told, I will start from the beginning. As I told that at this stage we cannot say anything about this because we don't have substantiative data which will substantiate our claim. There are no studies carried out in this regard that a mother was corona positive and then at this point of time, that whether 1 month, 2 month, 3 month before, and then she delivered the baby after 3 months, and then whether the child which was born to that mother is really immunologically prone to this disease, or immunologically he is resistant, he cannot have this corona virus, or if he has, his body can develop the resistance. So in absence of the studies, we cannot say much, but there are chances if your immune system of the baby has got the antibodies IgG, which are crossing the placenta and reaching to the child, that they may have certain bearing, but as of now, we cannot say anything in absence of any conclusive proof or data or any study, because nothing has been carried till now.
Thank you, Burhan al-Haq, for your question, and thanks to Dr. Manzoor for his answer. We have another question, which is to Dr. Manzoor, is from Urziba Zahoor. She's from Department of Zoology. She wants to ask why some parasites escape immunity in humans.
As I have clearly demonstrated in my talk again and again, that the some parasites are using list of, I had listed in my talk that they are using many mechanisms to evade the immune response. And it depends upon the host, whether this the immune system of the host is strong enough to ward off that parasite or not. For example, I had told about the antigenic challenge, the antigenic shift, antigenic drift, immunosuppression, shedding of these antigens at different points, and then there are certain these different life cycles, complex life cycle of the certain parasites. And in addition to that, there are these molecular mimicry is being employed by certain parasites to evade the immune response of the host. So even because when the immune system is not able to recognize this parasite as a foreign molecule in absence of this molecular mimicry, in presence of molecular mimicry, so how immune system can generate an effective immune response which will clear the parasite from the body. So it is that these mechanisms like of that antigenic shift, immunosuppression, then this antigen shedding at different points of times, then masking of the antigens on their surface, and these or skewing the response from Th1 to Th2, which is actually needed in case of those infections, because of which they are able to generate successful infections.
Thank you.
I hope I have answered the question.
Okay. This question is for you, both of you. Basically, question was asked by Asha, but I will substantiate it. She wants to ask, is there any parasitic threat of next pandemic anywhere in the world? I think she wants to ask why we are facing new emerging diseases these days and what we should do. And I think both
to answer your question, this is not that we are facing in now. It is a different theories and different religious communities are creating that because our moral values have degraded and this and that, and because of why we are facing these pandemics. So pandemic is not a new thing. There is a nature, there has been mass extinctions in the history. We are witness to that, and there will be such things in the future, but that take a lot of time to execute it. And there has been these pandemics in the history. If you talk about from 1720 to 1820 to 1920, and then now in 2020, we have these recent four, when there was cholera pandemic, there was Spanish flu, and there is now the coronavirus. These things repeat, but they take a lot of time, hundreds of years, 200s of years. Then there will be either there will be mutations in the existing viruses, because as of now we are talking about the coronavirus. It's not something new. There was a paper in 2007 which had itself talked about that this coronavirus eating of the bats and those other creatures by certain Chinese may risk that the coronavirus will spread at a very large scale, but that paper was ignored. So this coronavirus is not something new. It has been with us since long. It was discovered way back in 19th century. And now there has been a lot of research going on. It got mutated, or it is a new strain. It got out of proportion. Then we are having a pandemic. Maybe next 50 years, we'll be having another pandemic. Maybe next 10 years, maybe be having. Nobody can have a deadline about it. And if we talk about the American Congress was intimated by the Bush administration in 2003 and 4, he has delivered a talk to the Bush administration that this pandemic, our country should remain concerned about this, and huge lot of funding was asked for, but the Congress denied at that time, ignored that pandemic. Otherwise, in 2004, this was evident that we were concerned more about the Americans, that America may face a pandemic like of situation, because it was a security assess situation after 2001, these 9/11 attacks, that they had a security assess, and then after that they said that there can be biological warfare and we may face the pandemic. In that context, they had asked for the funding. So these pandemics are not something new. They had been in the history. They will be there, but maybe that the frequency or may increase or frequency may decrease. It depends upon the factors which are not in our control as of now. Dr. Khurshid can extend this.
Thank you.
I think there is no need. Dr. Manzoor has very well explained this. There is no, we cannot predict anything. It is all what is happening, again, the ambit of nature, natural control. But one particular thing is that what man is doing, we are developing certain models. Based on those models, we are assuming that if the same thing is happening, suppose the more man tries to interfere with the nature, certain major untoward incidents are going to happen. You see, we are nowadays in the period of gene technology. We are talking about this is called rogue science. Every time we are altering the blueprint, the genetic material of these infectious agents. So the more we are peeping deep into them, we are altering them. So the possibility becomes more. So what we could expect naturally within some particular period of time, by more anthropogenic, by more human interference with the nature, it was functioning. So we might accelerate. You see, certain people are were saying this time that this COVID-19 is a lab creation. It has been created in the lab and then circulated in the human populations. So the scope is there. There is another possibility because man has so much enabled itself because of technology. We have every technology, we have technique, tool with us that we can play with the nature. We are developing unnatural things with the nature because we are editing the what is called as genetic material of every infectious agent. But if we consider this thing into viewpoint that man is now altering the genetic blueprint or genetic material or changing the genetic expression of infectious agents. But based on these, we can expect more havocs, more epidemics, more pandemics. But what will basically happen, no one actually knows. But as Dr. Manzu rightly pointed out, if 5 mass extinctions happened so far, but 6th we are being told upon, it is man enforced because man is interfering with the functioning of nature at each and every level. So by this, if we consider this particular thing, we may expect, but nothing can be foreseen, nothing can be predicted that a particular pandemic or epidemic will emerge. It is nature that knows the better answer, the best answer, when, or how it is going to happen. We are open to it and we have to face anything nature decides for us.
Thank you. So final question from me to Dr. Manzoor. So what are your expectations about vaccine when it will be ready and what are its prospects to be effective?
So
talking about COVID-19.
Regarding the COVID-19 vaccine, we are already seeing that at present there are 6 vaccine candidates. Besides that, though, the one which has been already approved by the Russian agency. 4 of them are based upon the different antigenic fragments here and there, and 2 are the whole cell-based vaccines, means particulate vaccines. And as immunologically saying, those vaccines which are having particulate, which contain a plethora of antigenic fragments, the chances of those vaccines to be more successful, they are more. Instead of that, we are making the vaccine based on a particular fragment, or the S protein or the M protein or the other proteins individually. Although they can generate the immune responses and can prevent you, but the whole cell-based vaccines are usually known in the history, throughout the course of the history, that they are providing more immune response. So hopefully the vaccine which is coming from the America and one that is the ChAdOx vaccine, which is a heterogeneity that is using many components of that particular virus, ChAdOx from the London-based this Edward Jenner Center for Vaccine Development in the London. So that, as well as the one from Arena from America, RNA-based vaccine, maybe that can be, because they are putting a lot of efforts in that, and 6 organizations are working for the ChAdOx vaccine. But still, again, this is for a country like us, it remains a distant dream, because if we are having 140 crore people and you had to deliberately give 2 vaccine doses, maybe that third one may be also needed, but 2 compulsorily to generate an effective immune response you have to give. And if you had to have 280 crore vaccines, then you talk about the cost, and we are already, our financial coffins are getting emptied, and how we will fund those 300 crore vaccines, that is what we actually need. And then how many more should be generated in order to make efficient delivery to the grassroots level? There should be almost 500 crores of vaccines which will be made, and then the economic cost, then the delivery systems, then the precautions associated with it. The herd immunity is one of the options, and people, by the time the vaccine will be available, most of the people will have got immunity towards that. And if Almighty Allah, everything goes good, I wish that Almighty Allah may help us in this case, so that we may never require this vaccine. Because then you talk about the mutations, you talk about the different things, and then again you need a different vaccine. So this becomes an easy tool before the vaccine industry to take away, or to torn away our pockets. Because as has been the case with this, usually you go to these days to different shops or medical shops, you get the flu vaccines normally. And I believe that being an immunologist, I had never ever preferred these vaccines to my children or to my family, because most of the time you never know whatever they are selling it to you. Keeping in view the drug mafia and the pharmaceutical company industry and the medical regulations in India, pharmaceutical regulations, especially in this part of the world, that is Kashmir, we are seeing here and there fake drugs, the doctors and everything, how this nexus goes on and on. So then these vaccine is being produced by Abbott, and how they are looting the people. The same Abbott vaccine for flu is being sold by one person for 2,000 rupees. You go to the next shop from the same Abbott company, you find it for 1,500 rupees. To the third shop you go, you find it for 1,000 rupees. And another one I found, it was 800 rupees just. So you never know which one is the original and which one is not there. So I believe that instead of vaccine, we may develop the herd immunity, and most people become asymptomatic even if they contact the infection. But we have to keep our vulnerable population at bay. We have to keep good take care of that population who are vulnerable, especially the women who are pregnant, where the immune system is very weak, or those who are our old age populations, or those people who are having some comorbidity already, who are suffering from one or the other disease. So if we are able to check that, keep that population at bay from these infections, or allow them low doses of this natural infection, what is happening. So, but rest of the things, I think Almighty Allah will take care, and this virus will also die the natural death, as has the Spanish flu and many other viruses.
Thank you for your detailed answer. Dr. Khurshid, do you have a say on this?
No, I think
say anything?
No separate say. My words are the same as Dr. Because last time I came up the same. I bought 5 of these vaccines for my 2 elder parents and my other 3 members in the family. But still, I am very apprehensive what I have got. Because later on, I heard from the newspapers that the same Abbott vaccine, that I got the same, it is being, as rightly Dr. Manzoor Saab pointed out, that it is being sold at different rates, and that make me suspicious what I have basically purchased. So in fact, we need to be natural. We need to be believers of the herd immunity. We need to protect our body. We need to give enough nourishment to our body to boost our immunity. By boosting what we can protect ourselves by making ourselves strong. Dr. Manzoor rightly pointed out this time that the ultimate thing, we have to accept everything but believe on the herd immunity, but we need to strengthen our body. By strengthen, we mean we should give enough opportunities, enough options to our body to develop the natural means of immunity and the resistance, which is manifested through humoral or cell-mediated modes, whatever it is. So that means more interaction we are giving to our body with the moderate level of the parasite. We should never be afraid of any infection. That basically helps build up the immunity. So as Dr. Manzoor Saab was right, and that we are just taking antibiotics just like these toffees or chewing gums. There is no check. There is no control. Anyone can go to the market, get the antibiotic dose as per the treat for days. But we are never knowing what is destroying our normal microbiome, which is basically there to help us to build our immunity. We are basically inviting trouble for us. We are discriminating with our body. We never know. Everyone is a medico, everyone is a doctor. Without knowing anything, we go prescription ourselves, get a medicine, get an antibiotic, get a painkiller, without any advice, without any basic knowledge. So these things are basically very problematic. We need to be cautious in this particular area, because I again believe our body is built up. Immune system is with this purpose. It needs to protect us from the infectious or the noxious agents. So we need to take care of our body system, our immune system, by relying on natural diet, avoiding the other synthetic what we get from the market. I think that way we will be boosted immunologically, and we will do better against infections or some other pathogens. That is all I can say.
Thank you both of you for your final sessions to our participants, and we have final takeaway from this mini seminar conference. And I have one message from Dr. Bashir Ahmad Loan, and he has rightly said we should learn to live with the parasites having least morbidity. So the aim of this webinar was to acquaint youngsters, young researchers to get acquainted with the latest advances in immunology, and we had to focus on both positive aspects and negative aspects of parasites. So the special about this webinar was that we were taking these two things together. So finally, I would like to wind up, and I thank both of you, take your time and were part of our webinar. I thank you. And on behalf of Principal and Head Department of Zoology, I would like to propose a vote of thanks to each and every participant who were part of this webinar. At the outset, I am happy to thank our patron, Professor Mushtaq Meer, who for his continuous encouragement and support. And it was impossible to conduct this webinar because of busy schedule in our college, but because of his support, we were able to, conduct this. I extend my thanks to Head Department of Zoology for taking lead role in organizing this webinar. I also thank each and every member of Department of Zoology who were part of this webinar and who supported during the conduct of this webinar. My sincere thanks are due to Dr. Manzu Meer for his beautiful thought on new advances in immunology, and again thank him for his deliberations, and I hope he will be part of our discussions and debates in future course of time. I am highly thankful to Dr. Khurshid for his talk, new emerging idea about the ecological role of parasites, and these aspects are really important for youngsters, which I mentioned earlier. We have debated these things to tell them that there are new areas where they can work and research on. And that is how you can become extraordinary research. That is the difference between researcher and extraordinary research. And I extend my gratitude to each and every participant. And I again thank all of you for spending your precious time to be with us. I hope this webinar will entice more deliberations on these ideas, new ideas, which are very important for every researcher. With this, I am signing off. Thank you. Meet you again with new idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Umar. Thank you, Dr. Manzoor.
Thank you, Dr. Tariq and Dr. Umar.
Okay, thank you.
Highly obliged.